have the meeting of the planning board on January 8th, 2018. Have a meeting, everybody. If anybody is here because of warrant articles, you do not need to stay. Because of an issue, we can't hear any of the warrant articles tonight. They will be heard at 5 o'clock on Thursday over at our building at 2 Fairgrounds. So if anybody would like to come to that, that's great. We'll see you over there. But we're not doing any warrant articles today. All right, we have quorum. I'd like to start off by saying that Joe Martlinger officially resigned this morning. He feels like he's going to have too many conflicts over the next year and resign. And I'd like a motion for somebody to have us send a letter to him of appreciation for his service to the planning board in the town.
Second.
Is that your second?
Second, yep.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We will be, Thursday, it will be on the agenda to recommend or transmit to the selectmen our vote as to who we want to take his place. And we need letters of interest put into the office in the morning.
How many years are left on his term? 2?
I believe.
I forget.
It's 20, yeah, it's 2020.
Yeah.
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 So if you'd like to put in your letters of interest.
It's warm in
Tomorrow
here.
morning, so we've got them.
Nice.
Okay. Go with the agenda. Somebody want to make that motion? We did move one thing that wasn't on your original agenda up.
Yeah.
The sketch plan up in front of the public hearing, so that was the only extraneous thing. And I didn't want to wait till after the public hearing. Okay. So somebody want to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Jonathan, a motion for a second. Nat, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okey-dokey. Catherine asked for the minutes to be put over to February, so we'll go on by there. We have A&Rs. There is one that was not anticipated, I assume, Catherine. It came in over the holiday. Miss Bellway at 25 Woodbine Street. You can approve it because it wasn't anticipated by me 48 hours in advance, but we will be. Oh, we can do that
Ratify
Thursday.
it Thursday.
Yeah, we ratify it on Thursday.
Okay.
Does anybody have any problem with the A&Rs?
Motion to approve, motion to endorse all the A&Rs as submitted.
Okay, 8189 Sankey Road, 8191 Kudish, 8192 25 Woodbine, 8193 Noguchi. Anything? Okay. Any
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Secondary dwellings, there was one in here not anticipated. Catherine put that on Thursday also. Schimmel Pond Road, 46 Schimmel Pond, and Paul and Cynthia Kosachek, 12 Appleton Road.
Motion to approve as per staff recommendations.
Okay, Mary's made a motion to approve per staff recommendations. Is there a
Second.
Nat has seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And we have one tertiary, Schimmel Pond, Michael Ross, 46 Schimmel Pond Road.
Yeah,
Is there,
Motion to approve as per
Mary made a
staff.
motion for staff comments. Is there a second?
second.
Nat seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We have previous plans. Again, I believe that Pesci, Leslie, is cruising someplace. And we only got them on January 4th, again, late. I know that's a deadline in general, but we've had a problem with this before, when we've asked them to stop dumping stuff on us at the last minute, so Pesci and everybody has a chance to review. Holly's suggestion was that we continue to February's meeting. However, Leslie said continue it to Thursday, just in case we can get some answer out of somebody. And Barry has recused. Leslie?
I did get an email from Dave Armanetti this afternoon, and I'm trying to find it. Anyway, he was asking for some of the lotting plans to be approved, and Ed Pesci did say that those were okay, and that if the board was,
Compared to all the rest of these plans?
it's just the plans that show the lot lines, the roadway layouts, that type of thing, not the engineering itself. So anyway, we would recommend that you endorse those so they can get those to the land court, and then the rest of the plans that do require Ed Pesci to sign off and to review calculations and other things can be done later.
Go to February.
Those can go to February. Yeah.
Okay. Does somebody want to
Okay,
make
so
that
how
motion?
do we make
They'll
that
figure it out
motion?
now.
Just so I'll make a motion, based on what Leslie said, with those plans.
To approve the lotting.
Approve the lotting changes.
Lotting.
Yeah, the lotting
Is there a
plan.
second?
I'll second
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
that.
And then motion to continue the other plans
I'll make
to
that-
February
I'll make that
12th.
motion.
Is it 12th, Catherine?
Yes, February 12th.
Okay.
And this isn't something that has to get done like Thursday. This is they need the
No,
time.
we don't even know
All right,
about that.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
fine. I'll make that motion till February.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Mm.
Shepley,
Yep,
she highly recommended release of the escrow funds.
yeah, I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have Melissa back, Catherine. John, did you second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
National Grid, I know Holly, because we've had endless discussions about National Grid for several months. They're in, they're out, they're in, they're out. They don't need to come, they do need to come. Here they are.
All that MCD thing, the airport.
Release the requested, just recommends endorsement of the plans. We all have looked at them ad nauseum in
Yes.
the file.
Pesci recommends them,
Yep.
Yep.
endorsement.
Somebody want to
So-
make that motion?
Motion to endorse.
Jerry made a
Second.
motion to endorse, Nat seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Gray Lady subdivision, which is the Maury subdivision, that was Donnie Dimick.
Yep.
Endorsement of all the documents, we finally have them all, and they need to get going. Does somebody want to make a motion
I'll
on that?
make that motion.
All right, Nat made that motion, is there a second?
Second.
John seconded, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody who came in late, the warrant articles are not going to be up for discussion tonight. They're not coming up until Thursday at 5 o'clock over at 2 Fairgrounds. There was an issue with the notice. So no warrant articles will be discussed tonight. Okay. Public hearing. Where was that
Sketch
other
plan.
plan? Yeah, sketch plan. That was the sketch plan that we moved up.
Yep.
Somebody want to make that motion?
Are we gonna hear from you?
Is anybody here for that? Off Eel Point Road? We've sort of seen it
I
before.
don't remember this. That refreshed me.
You want to turn around
Yeah,
and
I
take a
think
look?
that's,
Uh,
yeah, I agree.
Leslie?
If I could just make a suggestion, this was at the very end of the agenda, so whoever's representing the owners may not be here. Maybe we
Oh.
want to hold this until
I think that would be
later.
Because we moved it up so it wouldn't hang out there after everybody else.
But I think that's a prudent thought.
Okay,
So we'll
hold
just skip
that.
it for now. Okay, good.
Valero come in and sign the thing, look, Catherine?
Yes, the extension.
Okay, so there's nothing on here for that. So,
All right, so-
that's what I'm on.
It's going to November
Yeah,
15.
here.
18, 2018, I believe.
Bouquet for Pinkham has asked has to go over to February, it has to be re-advertised. Somebody want to make that motion?
Well,
Isn't it?
that's just
It's
automatic.
just automatic.
Yeah. And the next one is too.
Next one is withdrawn, no, make a
Oh.
motion to
No,
withdraw
motion to
without
withdraw.
prejudice.
Oh.
And that'll be my motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next one has been requested to go over to February 12th also. Patty,
Okay.
we think they're on it, ready.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the next one will be 7 Surfside Road. They are here, they're ready to go forward. You have an update in your staff report,
This is the parking, right?
parking layout,
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
they get 4 units on this lot or not.
Yep.
Yep.
I know
Okay.
all of us drive by it every single day.
Yeah. Okay.
Representing the applicant is?
Good evening. I'm Ann Cuspa from Housing Nantucket. I'm here with a couple of my board members. We are here, let's see, we were here in November, and we've changed a few things and would like to update you on those things. I guess just kind of summary, we are requesting approval for 4 dwellings on this lot. Right now we have 2 dwellings on the lot. The COs were issued on the 2 dwellings that we just completed, and we have the tenants moved in. They're local people who are in the 60 to 80% AMI bracket, so they're working people. We are requesting permission to put 2 other dwellings, and I know we submit a plan there.
Essentially, this isn't correct. We've got existing and proposed.
There you go. There.
There you go.
Yes.
Your existing and proposed are backwards on on the plan I'm looking at right now.
I don't think so. C and D are the existing.
Look at this map. In your packet, they're backwards.
Is that, are we looking at the right thing up there?
Yes.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not the
That's
right
the
map,
4
right here.
Mine hasn't even opened yet.
Should have another one.
It's big.
So we have the 2 over there and the 1 over there.
It's a 5 meg
Yeah,
file.
no,
So anyway, C and D are the existing units where the tenants just moved in. And what we're proposing are units A and B, which are new construction. We'd like to put 2 one-bedroom cottages on there. We changed a few things since last time with the plan. We met with the neighbors, who I also see here tonight, and we listened to their concerns and, of course, want to be good neighbors. So we added a few things, including, let's see, we moved around the parking quite a bit. You can now see 8 spots, so that's clearly 8 spots. The tenants in Unit C and D, within their lease, we've obliged them to only use 1 car per unit. So we do have the space for their guests, but the tenants themselves only own 1 vehicle per unit. So we think that'll keep down car traffic there, which was a concern. We placed a 6-foot board fence on that upper boundary there between the rider lot and our lot. Yes. So that's
How far does it go to the street?
well, we talked about that. And down there on Marianne Wilson's side there on the bottom portion, we were thinking we would line it up with hers, which is more towards Surfside Road, that hand, yeah, like a little bit back there. Yeah, yep. And so that there would be that viewing there. You have to see the bike path pretty well when you're getting out there. So we didn't want to bring it all the way to the property line.
Plus, the HCC doesn't allow them to go all the way to the street.
Right, so not our plan at all. We also put in some foundation planting in front of the 4 units, so that'll dress it up a little bit, yep. Then you can also see the existing trees, which are ash trees. That's a tulip tree where the hand was there, so we took great pains to save that tree. And those are some cherry trees where the hand is, and then in the front are the ash trees, and the rest would be grass. We'll hydro seed that once the spring comes around. We moved the bulkhead so that it was away from the rider property and more towards the other unit so that that wouldn't disturb the riders on that side. Let's see, what other things? We moved the stoops a little bit. We tried to increase the distance between Unit C and Unit B. We moved those B and A a little more towards Surfside Road, but they do have that space for the stoop. So this is our new plan, and I hope that you like it and would like to hear what your thoughts are.
Okay, John.
Actually, I kind of want to reserve my comments until after the neighbors that are here. If there's anybody that opposes it or has some comments about it, speaks, and then I'll comment if necessary.
Yep, that makes
Go
sense.
to the board first, Nat, Barry.
I just want to ask one question, Ann, on the trees, are we keeping the big tree there?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It's a flowering
I
tree.
know
It's very rare.
I understand that, but the problem is it takes up so much space for parking.
I mean, if we
Backing up.
lose it, we could still fit the 8 spots in there with the
Yeah.
tree. So we
I'm not
thought,
trying to say I want to cut a tree down. Don't want you to think that. I'm just talking legit.
well,
the
that's why we
space.
thought we could limit, within the lease, we'll limit the cars to 1. So
Okay.
then you only have 4
Right.
official cars that are parking
Okay.
there. and you have the space for a guest.
Yep.
You also have the space down by Holgate's Laundry. There's 2-hour
No,
parking there. Mm-hmm.
I understand that. I'm in agreement with that. I'm just asking, because you didn't really technically say anything about the trees other than what they are.
No,
I wasn't
they're
sure
staying.
of what we were doing.
Nope,
Okay.
definitely staying.
Okay.
Barry?
Nothing at the moment. I think I'm going to take John's position here right now.
I'm good.
David?
My biggest concern would be how they're going to do construction with the tenants in there
Yeah.
and the tree.
We talked to the Barretts
Bill.
about that. We're talking to, Stacy and Trevor Barrett, Barrett Enterprises. We're talking to them about where would you put your trucks, and is that all going to work, and are you able to meet our timelines? Because like we talked about before, we had said, we want to make sure this is done within a year of the building permit being issued, and they say that they will, and we're going to put those items in our contract with them. We also heard the neighbors concerned about when work would be done. Is it going to be done on weekends, holidays? So that's also something that we'll address with the Barretts, that it will not be done on holidays. We have experience working with them, and they're very courteous, so I think they'll oblige.
Okay, I do have some concerns. I don't know what happened to this thing. It looks like it got all screwed up here. Security fencing, you're going to have full foundations under these guys, and they're right off the bike path, and they're right across from the school, and this is going to be taking place during school, and it becomes an attractive nuisance. Do you have any plans for any kind of security fencing here?
Well, the orange fencing would be certainly put in place.
That isn't enough.
Last time we rented the fence from East something fencing, it was off-island entity, but it was like a chain
Yeah,
fence.
they put the.
That's the only way you're going to get my vote, is a chain link fence during construction. I seem to remember
You mean
that.
the kind that goes in the blocks?
Yeah, the ones that just keep kids out.
Yeah.
Are you concerned with the entire foundation or just the front and then?
And the whole thing being directly across from the school and that close to the bike path. And, parking can be in setbacks,
Yeah.
right? Parking
We
doesn't
have-
have to meet the setback.
Isn't that, I think spot 6 is within the setback.
7 and 8 are.
Yep,
But they're
7
way
and 8
away
are-
from the setback as opposed to pushing parking back.
I think that the intent was to save that tree there, that cherry tree in the back. That's why it's kind of pushed off. Are you talking about between the whole gates?
I'm talking about going this way.
There's a cherry tree there, so that's why we could fit this 8 spots without moving any
But
trees.
you'd
so-
run into a tree, yeah. And the only other thing, parking, what is that, 7? What is that number?
4?
Which one?
Right there, is that 4?
Yes.
You've got a path going from that car blocks. You see how the path goes out of the top of that parking space?
Yeah, that's
Who's going to get in
existing.
there? Nobody. Wouldn't it make sense to run that straight out instead of curving into a car that's already there?
Sure,
You're not going to get to it.
that makes sense.
How big is that apron? Width? It looks larger than it's supposed to be. Leslie? That's wider than 15 feet. It's not double loaded. It's not side by side where you're allowed to go to 20 or 22 feet. That's wider than 15 feet. And I didn't know if that violates the curb cut width. Normally.
It would need to either, A, be narrowed down to 15 feet, or B, you could grant a special permit to allow it to be wider. I'm not sure that that's something they requested, so
No.
I'll find a plan with a measurement on it.
I don't believe it's something they requested. I'm looking at what they requested, and it's nothing to do with that. So I think we've got an issue with the width of the parking, the apron. I think those are my real concerns at the
Well, I
moment.
know Bob Little here just reminded me that Victor Brandon, just, they put in the apron as per his specs.
Whose specs?
Victor Brandon's?
Doesn't matter. You have to have a special permit to get wider than 15 feet. So that's just something we're going to have to address. Because if you didn't ask for it, we can't add it. So those are just some of the technical issues.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I just have one question. The proposed units, A and B, are they going to be stick-built? Are they going to be
Yes.
modular? Or are they going to be moved from somewhere else where the square footage could change?
No, it's stick built.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
The whole idea is to make them similar to Unit C. So we already have the plans for that.
You've got
And-
elevations in your packet.
Yeah,
They look just like C.
right.
Okay. Anything else from the board at the moment? All right, we'll open it up to the neighbors. I know you're here. Richard, you're the last one out in that row. Do you want to say anything?
No, I just the last time I brought
Come up to the,
I brought up the trees.
come up to the microphone.
Sorry. Last time I brought up the issue of the trees that were already there on my property, and these people came along and built their houses on their property line, but my trees are really tall, 25, 30 feet tall. I made an issue last time at the meeting that if any one of those trees comes down and crushes one of those houses, I'm not going to be responsible, and I'm not going to allow my insurance company to pay any claims. And other than that, they've addressed most of the issues with us, and I think they did a pretty good job. And as far as that fence is not going to go to the street. It's going to set back.
And it usually ends, the 6 foot, they can go 4 feet to the street, but usually
It's
the
not
6
going to be
ends
that
at your
close.
house.
It's probably going to be about 14 feet from the bike
Okay.
path. Yeah, it's going to. She's got trees that are already in there,
Yeah.
Leyland cypress, and they stop about 14, 15 feet from the bike path, and that's all we want the fence to go.
Cool.
Yeah. So, but like I said, I'm going to get this in writing and get some certified letters out that, in regards to those trees, I'm not responsible.
Okay.
I mean, those trees come down. That's not my problem
You guys
because
gotta-
I was there first.
You guys have to have that
The
agreement.
tree was there
That's-
first.
Pardon?
Thing.
But that's not really within the purview.
Just kidding.
Right.
I don't know what's what, but all I'm telling you is I'm not dealing with it.
Yeah,
So get something in writing between their board and you.
like the seals.
That's my biggest issue.
Bob, I suggest you have that conversation outside of this board. Sally, anything?
Sally Ann Austin, 19 Surfside. The only question I have, we did talk about the no pets, and it says here that they've restricted the tenants not to have pets on the premises. I just want to make sure that we're not talking just the current tenants who have already signed the lease, that we're talking tenants as a whole.
Sounds like the
We are not restricting our tenants to not own pets. Our tenants are allowed to have pets. The tenants that we chose for the units do not have pets. And we specifically, chose them knowing that they did not have pets, knowing that that was an issue for you. So if they were to get a pet, they would have to follow our pet policy, which includes shots and insurance. and-
Restrained at all times?
We have a whole pet policy. If it's a nuisance to the neighbors, you can call us. It's a violation of their lease if this is a consistent problem for them. But we're not going to restrict our tenants
Well,
from
from day
having.
one, we've said we don't want them to have dogs, and you can't have 4 units with 4 dogs in
With-
that smallest spot. It's just,
I mean, with all due respect, they are allowed to have a pet. Just because they're low income doesn't mean that they
doesn't mean
shouldn't
about
have-
low income.
All right,
Don't start
guys.
throwing
All right,
that
You
out.
have to talk through the
excuse me.
chairman, you can't
Yeah.
talk back and forth.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, we good.
So Sally, direct your comments to us and then we'll go there.
Okay, because you can't pull the low-income card. It's not about being low-income, high-income. I don't care if these are, $5 million houses. It's a very congested and dense area. And I have a dog. Marion Wilson has a dog. It's not that we hate dogs, but we have seen what's happened with the past tenants in that house when it was being rented from Housing Nantucket. It wasn't a good experience. We have said this from day one, that those units are too close together. And if you got somebody in Unit C with a pit bull, in Unit A with a chihuahua that looks like an appetizer, you're opening yourself up to a lot of liability. But also, I don't want Unit C's pit bull coming over to my house either.
I think we know. I think we can deal with it. Bob, you're jumping up there.
Between Housing Nantucket...
Bob, put that up right to your mouth and identify yourself for the
Bob
tape.
Little.
Thank you.
You're a board member of Housing Nantucket.
Housing Nantucket, as well as on the board of Nantucket Education Trust. And Housing Nantucket has about 35 units, rental units scattered around the island, and NET has a dozen units on Cow Pond. So it's tickling 50 units, and in each of the leases, pets are expressly not allowed. You have to apply in writing, and we have to vet your pet. A little cutesy, but
That's good.
that's how it goes. And so we do have a couple of pit bulls, I will say, on Cow Pond, and they understand the risks. They have to get special insurance policy. The dogs are not allowed to be chained up unattended, left alone barking. And when we do get concerns from neighbors, we address them right away. So I think that in our meeting a few weeks ago, we addressed the issue, and we tried to say that we want to be kind and thoughtful to our tenants and acknowledge the fact that people have pets. But we also are very firm about how we manage our tenants' pets. And if the pets bother you, we really encourage you to contact us. And that was part of the reason that we wanted to get acquainted with all of us, so that we would have an open line of communication. So if there is an issue, we can address it. And believe me, we are incredibly responsive, and we will.
Bob, do you have that pet policy for your other tenants in writing?
Absolutely.
Can you provide that to Marion and Sally and those guys
Sure.
and the writers
Ken
to make
has
sure that
drafted-
they have it, so they know
Yeah.
what to expect, especially the
Sure.
tying them up outside, and they're not
Yep.
allowed to be loose.
They cannot be unattended. That is just point blank. And over at Cow Pond, there's 12 units in that small patch of green. So there's a little elbow room, but it's close quarters.
Yeah.
And I would say that 75% of our households have pets. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of NET in about 2004, we were so paranoid about pets that we enforced the no pet policy, and we had 30% vacancy because people wouldn't rent if they couldn't have their cat or their dog. And we're not for profit. Housing is, net is. We can't afford vacancies. So we have to be friendly, but we communicate very effectively at the outset. And Ann and her staff are very clear to applicants.
I think that pretty much answers the
That's
distance
good.
we're ready to go, is that you
Yeah.
have a pet policy
Yes.
in writing, you provide it to all the
Yeah.
neighbors,
Yep.
and you make it clear that they're not tied up outside, unattended, and they're not
No.
let loose. I mean, that's as far as we can really
I'd
go
like
with
to
that.
see in the pet policy having something about no pit bulls.
That's not
Because
something
I
we can
do-
take up.
It's a
'Cause-
sticky wicket.
You know,
Guys, you
Vicki
guys are
and
talking,
I-
hold it,
Yeah, sorry.
hold it.
Thank
You
you.
guys are talking back and forth again. That's not something the planning board can take up, is what kind of an animal it is. That would be something you'd have to work out with them, and that could be something in addition to what their written pet policy is. I think we all know the risks of that, and you guys can have that discussion.
Right. And we've addressed it with our insurance carriers, Congan, Coleman, and then Brock's.
Okay.
They have to have special riders if they have their 3 dogs listed on the high-risk category, and pit bulls have to be one of them. But as Ann explained, the current tenants do not have pets.
Well, I think the other reason why there's some question about that particular breed, the 3 breeds that I know of that are on that list, Dobermans, I think, and maybe Shepherds, is that it's directly across the street from the school. If they're allowed, those dogs are allowed on the premises just for you guys to work out outside of us, this is just as a suggestion,
Right.
you might eliminate those 3 particular high-risk dogs from that location, given how close it is to the school.
It's a good suggestion.
Okay, so you guys work that out?
We'll work it out.
Okay.
I just want to say that, Vicki and I own our homes. We can't afford to leave. We can't afford to make a parallel move. We lived there all our lives. And now these people are just renting. And I'm worried about people having dogs and such. I don't care about cats or hamsters or fish or anything like that. But I am worried about having dogs in such a dense area. I know, Marion's dogs occasionally escape and come visit when she was doing construction. And I just don't really feel good about the dog issue in this particular situation. And I own a dog. My dog doesn't roam free, but I don't exactly want to have any unnecessary vet bills and other things going on. I mean,
As I say, Sally, that we've gone as far as we can on this particular issue. We understand that. I think they've heard it also. I think they're willing to make some concessions on the pet issue as to what kind of dogs are not allowed on that site for various reasons. But we've gone as far as the planning board can go on this one. Is that my understanding, guys? How do you guys feel?
I agree with Bob said. I mean, I think Bob made it a little clearer about the policy, the discouragement that Nan mentioned. I mean, it's sort of like there's so much of an application list, you can kind of pick around some of the stuff. You know what I mean?
These are one-bedroom units, and we have 60 people in line for these units.
I mean, they have dogs in New York City, okay? I'm just saying. I'm not trying to say that that's an excuse or a comparison, but everybody's walking their dogs on bike paths and sidewalks, and they got their little bags and their little thingy-doos and everything else, and they got dogs are in people's purses now. One jumped out on me on the boat the other day. I didn't even know the guy had a dog in his pocket. I was talking for an hour. I didn't even know he had a dog. So I don't know. I mean, how do you do it? You say you can have a pocket dog, you can't have this. I don't know. This is odd. We already ran into this with the apartments. It was a little different because it's apartments. It's not the same as a house. Even though it's tight, they're houses with dirt around them. There's a place to, rock your dog. I don't know. I think Linda's right. I mean, I don't think we have the jurisdiction to say what kind of dog or no dogs completely. I mean, I understand the pit bull thing. I think that would be on the short end of the list of someone to even have a dog like that. Or like a Great Dane or a Saint Bernard or something like that. Mm-hmm. I haven't really seen too many of those around lately. But, I mean, I think that you guys can handle that between the neighbors and your vetting, the vet process, Bob.
Also, guys, let's be real. If this property had been bought by anybody but the housing trust, and they put a primary, secondary, tertiary over there, they wouldn't need our permission to do that. They could have 500 dogs over there.
Yeah.
We have a pet policy, which wouldn't be in place had it been sold to someone else other than us at the housing trust. Pretty much.
And I will say that Arthur's firm drafted the pet policy for all of our leases. So I believe that we're in pretty good hands.
Just make sure everybody has that.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah. If I may just editorialize for a moment, there's a glimmer of hope, and I think that sometimes renters might have a slightly different or a greatly different perspective than homeowners, and I hear where you're coming from. But I would like to toot Net's horn for a minute. In the 10 or 11 years that Net has had the housing on Cow Pond, 10 households have saved up their shekels and bought a home on Nantucket.
Yeah.
And we're really, really proud of that. And we price the product affordably enough so that people can actually have that choice, and it's pretty exciting when we get a notice from somebody who suddenly landed an opportunity to buy a place and they want to break their lease. It's bittersweet, but we always play ball.
Barry?
Just, Leslie, this is a special permit, is it not? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Two things. I'm really concerned with how this conversation tracked, because what I'm walking away with is that if you own a house, it's okay to have a pet. If you rent, it's not okay. A good part of this community is also the fact that we need to create rentals here. And we need to create rentals that are reasonable for people as opposed to some of the horror stories that we've heard out here. So I commend you on what you're doing at this point, because, again, this is some of the things we need to do to help stabilize some of the things in our community. Not everyone can afford a house. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing if they could? But they can't. So we need other mechanisms in place under which to do that. And I think you have to reasonably allow people to have a right to do certain things. And to me, that is an extension of the ability to have people have some type of creature comforts, shall we say. But the other thing, too, is this being a special permit. The last thing this applicant wants is to have to come back before us at this point if there's a significant problem. And that's something you need to walk away with, and the members of the public need to walk away with, is that whenever there's a special permit, hearings can be reopened. They get this. They know. They've been before it. But I need to tell you that as well, too. So even if you file a complaint or you've filed multiple complaints, nothing are happening, you always have that ability to come back before this board and we'll take a look at it again. And the tone may be very different than where we are today. So I think I would probably pro-offer to you, they want to make sure they're doing the right things from the get-go. They really do. So I'd be inclined to let them do it. I think I've heard they will try to work with you a little bit, maybe to allay some concerns. You're going to have a policy in front of you, too, that you'll be able to default back to. And I would certainly encourage you at this point, if there is a problem. When you had a problem in the past, when it was under their jurisdiction, did you ever file a complaint?
Excuse me, no, but I believe the writers did.
Okay. All right. That's because that's just an important thing to do, is to get written documentation in place as well, too. Until it's in writing, it doesn't exist.
Well, that was my second question. I know it's in writing in here tonight, what we've discussed and what we've agreed on, but I would like to know, is that going to be in writing somewhere else, so when in case there isn't a follow-through, we have something to fall back on?
What, the pet thing?
Just pretty much everything that we've agreed to.
Just give me 5 seconds, Leslie. Tell them what's included as part of what we have to do here.
The fences.
No. Just in terms of basically everything we talk about becomes a decision that'll be written into things.
Potentially, yeah.
So that's
you have the site. You have the site plan, like that, with showing that the bulkheads have been moved. Mm-hmm. We have the site plan showing where the fences are going. We have the site plan showing where the parking is going to be. So that will be, and they'll have to address or drop that apron down to 15 feet.
Right.
They'll have to address all of that on a site plan, which will be part of the exhibit that's part of the decision. So we have to file a written decision that we all have to sign with the conditions listed in it, most of which you guys have agreed to. The one thing that will not be in there, Leslie, we could always put in that the pet policy will be provided to the neighbors, if you want to go that far. Otherwise, you guys do it amongst yourselves.
No. Hang on, Leslie.
I would advise against anything involving pets being included in your decision. There's just a variety of issues with that.
Yep.
And at least the big one from a practical standpoint is anything in your decision has to be enforced by the zoning enforcement officer. Right. So I don't really know how he's going to
You can't enforce that.
Enforce that.
But you guys can enforce it among yourselves. Right. And again, if there is an issue, planning board special permits can always be reopened. Mm-hmm. If there is a problem with anything involving this special permit, we can reopen it and address it.
Yep.
The other thing, part of the conditions was the security fence, Leslie, during construction.
But anyways, do you want to see if she has anything else?
Anything else?
I have one more.
No, I think Vicky's got something, but
I was going to talk about the pet thing just quick, but I know it's, as long as I don't have to hear dogs barking, if they're there. But if it's going to disturb me, then I'm going to have a problem.
And you make that phone call
to them.
Yep.
Well,
because like I said, it's on a very busy road. People are always walking by with their dogs, and if they're outside, naturally they're all going to start barking. I've already seen a dog dart right across the road, and it almost died. They had to fly it out.
Well, the issue with the outside, they're not allowed to be tied up outside if
Okay,
they're
that's
unattended.
fine. If
That's
they're
in their pet
inside-
policy now.
If they're inside and you don't hear them barking, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
The other thing that I thought of, fire pits. You know, a lot of people in
Hate
the
them.
summer, it's
Gas ones.
a crowded property. I'm hoping that that's not allowed. It's going to stink the air. If four houses all, you know, it's going to be terrible. And it's dangerous in close quarters.
They're becoming very popular at the HDC, and I hate them.
Well,
You got a
gas-
comment about that?
gas ones.
I don't want to smell the
A lot of people like to have their grill outside.
A grill's different.
no, grill's
But
fine.
it smells.
Fire pits are an entirely other animal.
Yeah, we have, in our lease, we talk about fire pits. They're not allowed to have fire pits.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, that's fine.
Wood or
I
gas?
just, that's a little.
Because she's talking about wood. The gas ones are.
No,
don't
no
smell,
fire
but
pits,
No
Matt.
fire pits at
No,
all.
No,
Perfect. There you go.
don't even go there.
No, I'm just asking, listen, we're getting down into some technical things here, Madam Chair. We might as well just get it all out
But
there.
we don't need to make problems with it. Because this, just
Okay.
out of curiosity, the list of things they're allowed and not allowed to do, is that public document that you can give them a blank copy of a lease so they know what's in the leases?
I mean, I could give you a lease template if that would make you feel better.
So you know what's possible, what's not possible, so it allays some of the fears like fire pits and things like that. And the pet policy, that would make the neighbors probably feel more comfortable. Marion, same thing? Marion Wilson lives next door.
I live at 5 Surfside Road, Madam Chairman. I wanted to first say that I appreciate Ann and her crew. We've met with them. We've talked a lot about our comments and our concerns, and I think they've done a good job addressing them. I don't have many concerns. The ones I did mainly were safety and the parking. That's been addressed, and density on the property, which has also been addressed. Personally, I think 4 houses, 4 units is a lot on that piece of property, but I understand the need for the housing and renting, and I think that putting 1-bedroom units there would be appropriate use of that space. So personally, I'd like to see the project get finished, like a lot of people on this island, get some more families in there. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had one more quick thing, and that's it. I know my dad had mentioned the fence. I kind of wanted to go to like the end where I have like a little building on my property, so like it goes where I don't have to see any of the houses. But Mrs. Wilson has one that doesn't have the lattice, and I didn't know if we could just do a fence without the lattice because it would
That's
match.
an HDC thing. It's still a
that's an
board
HDC
fence.
thing. Okay.
Marion's may be a 6-foot board.
Right.
You can be a 5-in-1 board, but under HDC, there's still board fences. You have to go to HDC to get either fence on either side.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other comments from the board? Anybody else in the audience?
One quick thing, just to, you haven't mentioned this yet. We have a dog officer in Nantucket.
Yeah.
Let's.
Let's just move
And I
on.
think that's, all hasn't been said. I mean, they get very involved in different people's issues. It's almost like a sheriff for dogs. It's like the vet thing, Bill.
Okay.
Bob. So, you know what I mean? So I think that there's plenty of provisions here to deal with this, a potential issue if it ever even happens.
Okay.
So that's all.
So right now, Leslie, I think we have for conditions is a security fence during construction, chain link. That driveway has to meet the bylaw.
Yep, and I did find a scaled plan in the file, and it's shown at 20 feet, so it'll have to be reduced to 15.
15. And the site plan and the plantings and the bulkheads where they're shown and the fences where they're shown.
Did the board want a construction management plan?
I would think so.
There's
Didn't we
quite a
get
bit
it
of
on the first
discussion
ones?
about the
Yeah.
chain link fence, about
Yeah.
where vehicles would park.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's important to stress that,
No parking on the bike path.
yes, no parking on the bike path.
Okay.
So maybe that could be submitted within 6 months from the date of the decision for the board to approve.
Okay.
What about, at the beginning, someone mentioned no work on holidays, and there was some reference to work on weekends.
What was your plan for working on
plan was.
weekends, guys? So we can incorporate that?
Well, I know just from my experience with the Barretts, they work on Saturdays, they don't work on Sundays, so if you needed that in writing, I could ask them to provide that.
Well, just give Leslie the hours. I mean, no Sundays, clearly no Sundays. Saturdays, I wouldn't start early, and I would end early. I mean, does 8 to 4 on a Saturday? It's going to get it over with quicker.
Well, that's it. We want the project done, and if
Yeah.
we start really limiting the time they can work on it.
So no Sundays, 8 to 4 on Saturdays. And that's exterior construction, guys. We don't have any real control over interior construction once the thing is tight to weather and the shingling's all done. So that's exterior construction. Anything else from anybody?
They don't work on holidays either.
No holidays.
Right.
Anything else?
You want your sidewalk changed?
That was on my list.
Yeah, the
to relocate
sidewalk.
The sidewalk.
So there's direct access and not that curve in it's number 4. Yeah, straighten out the sidewalk so everybody can access it.
Can I just add one thing? I think at the last hearing, there was some discussion, or maybe Andrew and I had a discussion when we went to the site, about the view, sort of the corridor from Surfside Road looking between the units and having all of the bulkheads and the stairs and everything really open to view. Is the board interested in any screening or landscaping to hide that?
Well, I think the HDC is going to have an issue with that bulkhead in the front. That close to the sidewalk. So if we want to address where the bulkheads go or any screening, that would probably be effective on our part.
I just think you might want to consider requiring something to hide all those bulkheads from.
So screening between the two structures then.
Yeah, why don't you just go across
Yeah.
to the foundation screening right
Does
across?
that address the question about exclusive outdoor space for any of the units, or is it just open area?
I don't think that would be a hindrance as far as exclusive. They don't have exclusive space.
This isn't condo, so it's,
Okay.
there's
So a
no.
question for screening, if that helps with the screening.
Well, if you screen it between the two and put an opening so they can just walk in between the buildings from the bike path themselves, so you don't have to go all the way down the driveway to get in, that would probably screen both bulkheads. You just have a little gate in the middle or whatever in the middle. Does that work for everybody to screen in between the structures?
Yeah, can I just ask Ann one quick question on the bulkheads? Ann, why don't we just put the little stair things?
You don't
Because you have
enough
to put
room.
the gate, and it's more expensive. Because
Well, I know it's more expensive, but like that's
Yeah.
the most common thing now. Bulkheads are starting to phase out a little.
Well, they have one on the back building.
I
Yeah,
know-
Unit
I know,
D,
but
that
those
staircase,
are-
you have to
these
put
are brand new. That's
the
all I'm
door
just
and the
saying.
bottom. I mean, it's just a lot more money.
Okay, all right, forget it.
One other
And
question.
it keeps them from having bedrooms in the basement.
That's
Yeah.
true, too.
Yeah,
That's
I
the point.
understand. I know how they work. I'm just,
Leslie?
never mind.
What about exterior storage? I mean, typically, if this were, say, like a dormitory situation, the planning board would regulate exterior storage. The other thing that I don't see on this plan, and maybe it's on there, where the rubbish will be stored and how that's
Yeah.
going to be dealt with.
How are we dealing with trash? We don't see any trash
Rubbish
enclosures.
behind the buildings, and there is no exterior storage,
Great.
which is why we're putting in basements, but they're only 6-foot, two
Okay.
basements, so they're not habitable.
Anything under 7.6, I think is
Purposely
not
to get
habitable.
the stuff out of sight, out of mind. And as far as the screening, maybe we can work out a detail where there's just subtle screening in front of the bulkheads,
Yeah,
as
we can do
opposed
that.
to an
Yeah.
entire, like,
Yeah.
fence.
That'd be
Yeah,
fine.
no
So
fence.
it looks pretty decent from the road, but, you know,
But I would, for our purposes, and when you're updating this site plan, because you got to fix the entrance anyway, is that I would put down to Leslie's satisfaction where the trash is.
Right.
Where the trash bins are.
right. Where
So
do
we
put them
know.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but they have to be on the plan.
Okay,
Plus, you've got
Can
4
do.
structures,
And-
they got to be on the plan.
can do.
And those
Leslie?
will be like sort
They're
of
wooden
traditional
dumpsters.
wooden bins with the cans in them.
Latches and, yeah.
Okay.
But we'll
Yeah, I
present
think-
all that to Leslie, and then she can throw
Sure.
darts at it, and
Yep.
we can massage it till it's comfortable.
We don't have to continue this to get it. It's all worked out through staff. Anything else, Leslie?
No.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Somebody want to make a motion?
To close the public hearing.
Second.
Carl, I'm activating you.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion made and seconded to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And is somebody want to make that motion per all the comments we just made to Leslie?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Nat made the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for coming, guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're not recused, right?
No, I don't have to.
Okay.
But I will.
Can't recuse.
Right, but it's not.
For Alan Bell's, which doesn't exist anymore, but it's still on the record at the CBA. So just keep that in mind. And it did,
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have other business to conduct, so please forgive us.
I see Arthur jumping up. This is the Nantucket Trust Atlas Building.
Thank you. Arthur Reed, representing the applicant, Barbara and Leonard Lewis, trustees.
Guys, can you take it out in the hallway, please? Thanks.
Trustees of the Nantucket Trust, a very, very original name. I'm sure there are no others. This is the building, as you indicated, at 130 Pleasant Street, which is now the Atlas Restaurant. It's had various prior incarnations as a restaurant. The application that we have here is for one purpose only, which is to eliminate the restriction which we have at the present time, which provided that the only meals that could be served would be dinner in the evening and Sunday brunch. The present operators and the owner of the property want to have that lifted in order to enable them to serve lunches on the property. The staff report makes considerable mention of the parking situation. We submitted a parking plan. We're not asking for any relief with regard to parking. It's not part of the application, but that plan was an illustration of what exists on the property at the present time and what has existed on the property for over the last 20 years. The parking in front of the building is admittedly confusing in its operation, and cars park in various ways there at various times. The parking on the side, which is partially within the layout of Chin's Way, the portion of Chin's Way which we own, but which is subject to a right-of-way in which the other abutters to Chin's Way have rights of passage. But that's been there in the present layout for over 20 years and hasn't interfered with passage. There's adequate space between the features on each side of the travel part of the way to provide for a free passage of traffic. In any event, that's illustrative. We're not asking for any relief or change with regard to the parking. I will say also that there was a comment in the staff report about a report. There had been an application which was then withdrawn earlier this year which was submitted by the tenants of the property, the operators of the Atlas Restaurant, for other purposes. That was withdrawn, but in connection with that, Mike Burns submitted a plan and a letter suggesting that one possible way that would improve the layout of the property and improve the overall parking in the area would be for there to be an easement granted to the town which would enable the parking, angled parking, to be placed along that side of Pleasant Street, partially within the town right-of-way between the actual pavement and the lot line, and would enable angled parking in front of this building. The plan that is submitted also shows it, and obviously that would have to be worked out in each instance with the property owners as a possibility of putting similar parking in front of or on the Pleasant Street side of Lucky's and also the pharmacy. Obviously, that would take some working out with the town. A pole would need to be moved, and it would be up to you as to what your attitude would be toward that. But I will say that it's an interesting idea. It does increase the number of parking spaces that would be available, and if the planning board is interested in pursuing anything along that line, we're more than happy to try to work with the board and with the town toward that objective.
Parallel parking, not angled parking. Okie dokie.
So, just for the
Barry?
record, I do work at Island Pharmacy, but I don't have any financial interest in
I know.
But just for the record.
I know, I understand.
Yeah, just to divulge.
I have visited you many times there.
Yes, I know.
I have absolutely no concern about your participating in the matter.
It doesn't matter anyway if you're concerned or not, Arthur. Under the law anymore, it doesn't matter if you're concerned or not. If there's a conflict, there's a conflict.
Right, but
Just be clear.
in any event saying I don't think there's a conflict.
Thank you.
And there was at one point a lease issue with the parking from Sfolia's with Alan Bell's building, way back. Because I
Right.
was involved with all the ZBA decisions,
Right.
right from the very beginning. Okay. John, do you have any questions?
Just looking at it, 6 parking places in the front. I looked at the angled parking that they were potentially proposing, or maybe at some point, Mike Burns and transportation would be an option, and it looks like there are 6 there also. But I do like the fact that it would be a lot safer, a little bit more convenient to pull in and then pull out, as opposed to that scramble.
That scramble's not even legal. You
No,
can't back
okay.
into Pleasant
Exactly.
Street, and they're backing into Pleasant
So
Street.
I like the fact that they would grant an easement for future changing of the parking, and also what it boils down to is they're just looking for approval to serve lunches, and with the limited restaurants that are open in the off-season and things like that, I have no problem with that. So I think it's okay.
Nat?
Yeah, geez. Well, my feeling is that, and I kind of look at this area as like sort of a moving target that's constantly revolving and changing. It's improved so much in recent years, but it's still the same place. We didn't add parking spaces out of the atmosphere. They're still there. They're just being shifted around, and there's more sharing. The concept of sharing parking has sort of happened, especially on West Creek Road. The chicken box parking lot that everybody uses, I don't even know who owns it. Is it the towns, or is it Chicken Box?
Chicken
Who owns
Box.
that?
Chicken box.
Chicken
Right.
box.
Okay. That parking area that needs to be paved, that everybody should be paying for somehow, in my opinion. Everybody uses it. It's sort of like the back of the Cumberland Farms was when the fast food was cranking. Everybody's parking over there, walking over there in the movie rental before it went out of business. So you know what I mean? So I sort of see this as the same thing. It's going to change. Across the street, fire station's going away. I don't know if anyone's ever heard about that fire station.
I don't think the selectmen have.
But that's leaving. Something's going to change. There's going to be a lot of parking over there that's going to get used by various businesses, depending upon the timing of when they're open. People will be parking over there to go to Pie Pizza for dinner. I mean, they're already parking at Stop and Shop at night. Everybody does. So, the formality of this stuff is it doesn't fit these actual situations. It's just the way we have to go through this process, and it's sort of, we all know what the reality is, but we have to have something on paper. I get that. Lunch is not a popular thing. Ask any restaurant owner. I've been going in these places for 30 years. I know how they all think. They can't stand breakfast. There's no money in that at all. Lunch is sort of the second thing that there's no money in. I don't see it being crowded for lunch like a dinner situation, but the other businesses are all open that are closed at lunch. Right? So I see both sides of this. And the amount of improvements that have been made by the abuttering business is, that's sort of like that came first now. You know what I mean? And it's big improvement. There's probably going to be changes at the pharmacy someday. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying that's probably going to change at some point in time. So I'm okay with it because I don't think it's going to be, a detriment as far as how busy it will be, except that in the summertime, Stop and Shop parking lot is full. People use the chicken box lot all day long, and the chicken box isn't even open. That's probably going to be the new parking lot for lunch, in reality.
Not unless you require it to be the parking lot for lunch.
I'm saying to you, that's where people are going to park to go to this place when there's no place to park, other than some of the other spaces around. So
I know that as you say,
I don't know what we're supposed to do when these things happen. I don't believe in fencing. I don't believe in fighting over parking. We've already done that downtown. Downtown doesn't have parking. We all know that. Mid-Island is sort of shifting to sharing. It's just not there yet. And there's going to be a lot more changes in the Pleasant Street and Sparks Ave areas over the next 20 years that are going to resolve some of this stuff kind of by itself. And as we go through these small little hearings for these inky little changes, I just don't like to get bogged down in arguing over 6 spaces when there's a big, huge picture of parking. And it gets people upset because they think that we're making too much or they're not doing enough to fix it. A lot of it is out of our hands as each application and change comes. So that's all. That's my feeling.
Barry.
Yeah, but conversely, Nat, you do have to argue about it
Yes,
because
you do.
that's how we get things accomplished.
No,
okay?
I mean,
it's
making an argument.
No, but
I
what
don't
I'm
mean
saying,
debating.
but hear me out. What I'm saying to you, and we've talked about this. It's called logical incrementalism. In other
You have to
words,
write that one down, Barry.
you do little pieces when
Yeah.
the opportunity comes along, always shooting for the larger picture at hand. And that's sometimes what we have to do with this board is when the opportunity comes up for a smaller piece to deal with, that's when we have to kind of seize that opportunity at the moment and say, okay, it's part of a bigger
Like
plan.
we did with
Yep.
Dan's and like we did with Nantucket.
Right, and
Cape Cod.
so
But they
if you don't
happened at the
mind,
same time.
Arthur,
This is
Well-
not.
Yeah.
you know what though? Sometimes you're not going to have them happen at the same time, and you need to seize the opportunity when it comes up to try to do that. And you know what? Frankly, that doesn't bother me because sometimes that's a good test bed to ever to make a decision about is that really the right direction to be tracking into or not. It's easy to conjecture one way or another whether it's going to work, it's not going to work. You're always going to have differences of opinion of it. The true test is when you actually put it into place and watch it work. And guess what? Now that you've put it into place, if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't mean that it's now etched in stone. It means you change it. So, Arthur, if I may through, is there an easement in place for the front of this with the town?
No.
No.
No, because I honestly think that that is a direction that this board needs to entertain. Because when Mike laid this out, it really wasn't just about parking spaces. It was really a twofold thing. The first thing was it also created a streetscape.
Right.
So we have now a more consistent sidewalk plan that goes hand in hand with it. It moves the parking to where it should be. It makes it more pedestrian friendly, which I think is always a big thing we've talked about with the Mid-Island area. And certainly when we created the Mid-Island area, pedestrian friendly and shared parking were they were major concepts in this thing. And this board, I think, needs to always be mindful of that. So I, for one, really want that opportunity before us to not let this just slip off the radar Question is, how do we start getting there? And
Yeah.
you're posed for something.
I think we're all on the same. We're singing from the same hymnal on this. If this project were being built today, under the requirements in the Mid-Island District, the building would be close to the street.
Yep.
Bring it up like that. The fact is that we have an existing building in place where it is on the lot. So in a way, as far as the streetscape is concerned, and I agree, that was definitely part of Mike's letter. The whole thing is a very interesting concept.
Yeah.
And that effectively moves the building closer to the street, if you will, as far as the streetscape is concerned.
Yeah.
And as well as having various benefits in terms of the amount of parking spaces, but the appearance of the parking spaces as well. There's no question the present layout is, as John said, a scramble, or maybe it was not, but I think everybody sort of said that. We know that. It's what it is. And, the layout of cars that is shown on the plan is just an illustration of how cars sometimes are in there rather than actual legal parking spaces.
No,
but it's been that way.
No,
It's
no,
been that way for a long time.
No, they're not. They're never parked that way. Okay, anything else, Barry?
No. No, I'm just probably encouraging the board to keep an open mind on this. Because, as staff has said, and it's pretty clear here, staff recommends a discussion on the parking plan. Because here we go, this is an opportunity for us to be looking at things again for the future. So I can think of 1,000 reasons why not. I can think of just as many as to why we should.
Yeah.
Carl?
Thank you.
Anything?
I would just say that like you say, in the incremental steps, if the step is made to allow lunches, what is the corresponding step to advance the parking evolution?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where we are.
Good.
That's about all I have to say about it right now. I mean, it's not coming before us tonight that this is going to be a whole new parking lot in front. But we saw this a number of months ago from Mike, so I think it's a very interesting concept of angle parking, and I think it looks good. But once again, when you have a request for lunches, what is the next step along with that for parking?
David, anything?
Yeah, just the parking doesn't exist like that really at all.
It doesn't.
And there's always, whether it's Chin's Way, whether it's choosing Stop and Shop or the Chicken Box, there's always a scramble for parking there, or using the pharmacy. And so the daytime, Arthur's saying it's not as busy, or that might have been John, but I think the actual area is just as busy, if not busier.
Okay. This is the craziest parking plan I've ever seen submitted. Guys, you cannot back out onto Pleasant Street. It's on the list of no back out. B, those two spaces dead center on the front of their parking lot don't exist. Nobody parks that way. They've never parked that way. I was involved all the way back with Sfolia 20-some-odd years ago. I don't remember how far back that was, Arthur, 85, 87, somewhere?
Well, Sfolia was after that.
Yeah, 90.
Yeah.
Those two spaces on the upper side that are angled in the parking lot don't exist that way. People park nose in, back in, and go forward out. So that's a ridiculous parking plan. It needs to go away, and something that makes sense and meets the bylaw needs to be put back in here. Because under the ZBA decisions and the planning board decisions, that didn't exist, and it should not exist on paper now. Third, they don't own those parking spaces. They may have been practically used. In fact, the two that are closest to Island Kitchen didn't exist, because that was the loading zone under a previous ZBA decision. So those have been added in the way, mostly in the way. If you look back and track back on all the ZBA decisions that came forward, and then the Mid-Island overlay came into being and the planning board took over, They always had to get relief for parking because they don't own those spaces. They own about 5 feet of those spaces, and I'm getting into the derelict fee statute, not in this board. We don't care. You take it to land court. They don't own those spaces. They're in the actual path of travel to pass and repass. They've always been acknowledged as truncated spaces. They've always been sitting there. There's at least 3 of them have been sitting there in that little gravel area that got more formalized over time. They were not that formalized or quite that deep when Sfolia's was there. Because I had to do the site visits all the time. They're in a way, Chin's Way, which everybody has the right to technically drive over those spaces and block them, just so you know. To deal with Matt's comment about Dan sharing, the bank sharing, taking the access from the commons, coming up the backside of Nantucket, of the Cape Cod 5, all the other sharing we're doing at Sanford and Sea Grill, it's all going on now. Though, on paper, each one of them has an allocation for what they're supposed to have for parking. That's not the same thing here. When you have a neighbor bought his parking, which already existed because of the bamboo, and before that it was Chin's. When he bought that parking, he has the right now, because he's not in here for permits from us anymore, to prevent people from parking in there. Or in front of his own place now, because that was all part of Chin's as well. He didn't even own all the spaces that were in front of the Island Kitchen. They belonged in part to Chin, as part of Chin's Way. So it was all very convoluted back there. When the hen house came into being, where Island Kitchen is now, they were forced by the ZBA to lease spaces from the chicken box for their overflow parking because they didn't control Chin's parking, and they didn't control what was in front of them. They had 8 or 9 spaces on to the right side of that building. They didn't have enough for the ZBA, so they made them lease, I think, 3 or 4 spaces from the chicken box, which are somewhere in the wind over there. They don't need them anymore. He owns his own spaces now. When Sfolia's came into being, they originally had lease spaces at Allen Bell's at the pharmacy, which I don't think exists anymore either.
Which used to be a restaurant.
Which was EJ's.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but we cannot force somebody in this decision to allow them to park on their areas if they're already using all of their spaces. And I object to somebody saying that there's not very much people going in there at lunch. If you try to eat lunch in there,
Wait a minute.
at Island Kitchen,
I
let's
didn't
put it
say
that way.
that.
Island Kitchen is
Whoa,
packed.
hold on a minute. It's
Okay.
not what I said. It's not what I said.
We're not
This is
sharing
MSNBC.
if they don't agree to share. And I know they've already had a discussion
Not what I said.
about sharing the spaces, and that did not go over well,
Linda,
okay?
Linda, excuse me.
So let me finish, please.
Let her finish. Oh, okay, sorry.
I didn't interrupt you.
No, but you just said something that I didn't say.
Come on. Let her finish.
So we have an issue here where the parties are not agreeing to share the spaces. You can't force that issue. We could theoretically tell this building that's before us that they should go lease those spaces at the hen house or the Island Kitchen and that they don't need anymore, and lease spaces from the chicken box, and they've got more than enough spaces down at that end to accommodate everybody, whether it's a practical or whether it's on paper. We're dealing here with not the practical use of the neighborhood. We're dealing here with the actual, here's a decision, where are those spaces coming from?
Correct.
And we're not making any decision about adverse possession on those spaces because they've been labeled every single decision that they are in the roadway layout. But we could theoretically require them to take those spaces that don't exist at the pharmacy anymore, and they don't need them at the Island Kitchen anymore, because he owns his spaces, and ask them to go technically lease spaces from the chicken box to cover whatever overflow. But we're not making a pronouncement here that they own those spaces by whether it's derelict fee or whether it's adverse possession in this decision.
We're not asking you to.
You have had many conversations about it.
Oh, we've had many conversations, and in fact, you received a memo today, which I can pass out.
It was the same letter you gave us, Arthur.
It's similar from Boston Council.
And we got it today.
Right.
So I'm not looking at it again.
I understand. The point is, though, just to go to the issue of what we can do about the parking. Barry has his hand up. Do you
No,
want
go
me to-
ahead, finish what you're going to say, please.
Okay.
And then I do want.
What we can do about the parking, as a practical matter, is limited to what was discussed in Mike's recommendations. The side of the only other thing that, and something along this line has been proposed in discussions with the Island Kitchen owner, proposed by him, that there be, as I understand it, from the meeting that we had, parking spaces along Chin's Way, parallel spaces, I believe it would be along Chin's Way coming in. And, you know, the result of that would be to reduce the amount of potential parking, because it would essentially shut off the parking, the angle the head-in parking that now exists along the side there. If part of that were within our right-of-way, it would also, or within our lot line, it would interfere with the ability to keep the spaces that are up in that edge by Chin's Way. There wouldn't be room enough for them, and still to maneuver in the middle where the other two cars are shown, that I agree with you, or unless there's a prior arrangement, those cars are normally not there. In any event, though, I would stress that we're not asking for parking relief in this application. We're discussing the parking. We think the parking, as suggested by staff, needs discussion. The whole parking in the area, once again, as has been indicated, the whole attitude toward parking in this area has changed over the last 10 to 12 years, with the concept that with the emergence of the Mid-Island as a commercial district, that the concept of finding a parking space wherever you find it, and then walking to multiple business establishments that can be reached from that parking space, rather than feeling that you have to move your car 100 feet each time you go to 3 or 4 different merchants or restaurants in the area. Really doesn't make a lot of sense. I've got to confess that I have parked in the Stop and Shop to go to the pharmacy, and I've parked at the pharmacy to go to the Stop and Shop. So,
Exactly.
In theory, that works, Arthur.
Yeah.
But if there isn't an agreement, if somebody owns their parking and they put forth that they need all the spaces for their own business to keep functioning for their own people, that does not give you a right to park there if they don't want you to park there, unless you guys can come up with an agreement.
I'm not
And I
saying-
think you guys were talking about an agreement, and then it stopped.
well, we weren't talking about, I mean, there was a proposal made which we didn't think made any sense, so we haven't pursued
Well,
it.
that's because you're basing it on the derelict fee statute that you own to the middle of the road.
No, that's not exactly accurate.
Well, I'm not getting into that, but I don't agree that you own those 5 spaces at all, number one. Number two, you got to give us a parking plan that takes those 2 ridiculous spaces out of the middle of the front of the building and put those other 2 spaces nose back in where they've always been, and have the 4 regular
We can
spaces
show
in
that
front.
to you. It's not, you know.
You're also missing one very important part of that parking in front, because I had something to do with that as the chairman of the Handicap Commission at that time. You have a handicap space down on the ones that are down on the bottom, which has a sign that we're supposed to have a sign, and the sign was always supposed to be there, and it was an agreement with the AAB, Tom Hopkins, when they put the ramp in, that space be there and dedicated to handicap. It is not dedicated to handicap. The sign doesn't work. It's fallen over. If it's ever put back up, it was in the bushes, and that space is no longer designated, and a complaint could be made to the AAB about that space.
We'll check on that.
So I'm not sure the guys at Atlas were aware of where that space came from. But that's not there anymore either. So,
Check on
and
it.
that's not showing on your parking plan. We've got to give us a real parking plan, and that's not it. Because that's in the file, and that's not working. Now, as far as Mike's stuff in the front, I don't agree with angled parking. It's not wide enough. I agree with, I think like the Cape Cod 5 did, where they did that. If there's room to do the parallel parking, I think that makes a great deal of sense in front of that building, because people would park there and go to eat there at that building. Personally, as whether they serve lunch or not, I'm fine with serving lunch, so I'm okay with serving lunch. It's all these other issues that are out there, and I know they're going to address them when we're all stopped kvetching on this. Barry?
I would kvetch anyway.
So, just a few things. This document from Pierce Atwood, is that meant for distribution to the board
Yeah,
at this point?
yeah, I've got plenty of copies
And we
of
only
it.
got it today.
No,
Just now.
just
It's very
give me a
interesting,
second,
though. It's
okay?
interesting.
Go ahead.
I'm just asking a question, okay? That don't need to be. I'm just asking a question. So, thank you. Yeah, I don't.
We have it.
We got it.
Did you guys get it? Okay,
have
thank you.
All right. Yeah,
Take one
I already did.
and pass it down. You didn't. Thank you. So,
Anybody else need one?
no,
No,
All set.
just as long as Catherine has one.
Leslie, if through you to Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong. Is the parking spaces at Stop and Shop are also considered public space as well too?
The on-street spaces?
Yeah.
Yes, those are
Thank
public
you.
spaces.
All
You're talking
right.
about the
So,
Orange Street spaces, Barry, not their
just-
own, right?
And then
Are you talking about just the Orange Street parallel?
The
oh,
Pleasant Street.
Street parallel spaces?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
All right.
roadway layout.
Here we go again. We're kind of back to what the concept here, and I'm afraid that concept keeps getting lost in these incredibly bizarre disputes about my parking space, your parking space. This is almost going to turn itself into what happened with downtown, where one fine day people may just throw up their hands and say, "Guess what? We're not asking for any more. It's just park." Okay.
Oh, you're saying what I said.
The problem here is that we keep throwing these spikes in the process of what's intended for the Mid-Island area. And strangely enough, when we first started this thing, it's growing up on its own anyways. It's starting to take its own shape. So as a board, I think we need to be cognizant of that and try to work with it and make some sense out of it. And that's where I'd really like to hear from Leslie for a few moments, just to get some input from the staff level, because I know they're, both Andrew, Leslie, Mike are very intimately involved with that process. And I think it would be good for us to hear from them for a few moments. So through you, if I may.
Okay, thank you. If I could just sort of take a step back and go through a little bit of history, which I think could help bring this all together. So there was a permit in 1999 issued by the ZBA, and certain parking waivers were granted for a 28-seat restaurant. And at the time, the planning board actually recommended against the parking waivers. And in the end, they received a permit from the ZBA for dinner service only and Sunday brunch, and part of that was because of the parking waivers. In 2003, that's when the MyPod was adopted by town meeting and added to the zoning bylaw. And that's when, at least formally in our zoning regulations, this concept of promoting shared parking either through easements or through informal agreements or through the creation of public parking spaces really came into being. In 2007, the planning board, then the permit granting authority, granted a modification to the prior ZBA permit, and that added some additional seats to the restaurant, and it was based on the representation that the owner of the business had leased parking spaces off-site. And there was a specific condition in there that said if that lease were to go away, they had to come back and modify the permit. Now, I don't think that happened, but maybe it did.
They did.
In 2017, when more outdoor seats, well, actually, more seats, 12 outdoor seats, were added. And again, that was based all on this history of there's only dinner service. And I think, looking around at the surrounding businesses, at least at some point in time, you had the Bamboo Supper Club that was mainly a nighttime operation. The pharmacy, which is mostly, morning, daytime, early evening. Hen House at the time, which was mostly a morning, daytime operation.
They had,
and then you
they had a
the
closing time of 9 o'clock, in fact, in one of the ZBA decisions.
Right. And for the most part, that at least at the time, operated as a daytime business. And then you had Sfolia at the time, which was at nighttime. So in the immediate area, there were staggered hours of operation, which really lent itself to this informal shared parking. So now you have the applicant coming in that's limited to dinner service only and Sunday brunch, requesting lunch. And while a parking waiver isn't specifically being requested because seats are seats, all the prior relief was based on these hours of operation, which worked well with the surrounding businesses. So I do think it's entirely appropriate for the board to look at the parking and to see if it's appropriate for these new proposed hours of operation, to look at the layout of the parking that's on the site, which clearly doesn't work along Pleasant Street. And then I don't think that you should get involved in any way in the Chen's Way discussion about whether they have rights or don't have rights to use that or to use the parking. I think you should let that go and leave that up to the property owners to hash out. And we've done that in other decisions where there's a dispute about whether or not people have rights to use certain things. The planning board makes their decision based on the representation made by the applicant, and if in the end they can't do what they said they could do, then there's a problem with the permit.
So it's perfectly appropriate for us to say on paper to lease spaces from the chicken box like the other two had to do.
I don't think it's appropriate for you to make that demand, but I do think it would be appropriate for you to deny the request because you make the finding that the parking's not adequate for those hours, or to continue it and have
them try to work it
go
out.
and look at the situation.
You can't defer. You cannot defer to another entity or another time and place. What you could do is continue it to February and have them try to work out something over there, but you cannot have a decision with a contingency that they get something from somebody else. You can't do that. No, you can't do that in a decision, period. So you have to continue it and let them try to work it out ahead of time and come back with a proposal, because I do remember that we had to bring the chicken box in order to lease some of those spaces when they're not really busy, which is after 9 o'clock, before 9 o'clock at night. So there was concurrent applications.
Yeah, I understand, but I was just trying to somehow reword what you were saying, only not to focus on the chicken box, but other surrounding businesses.
Yeah, but you can't defer. It has to be done before we have the decision filed. Barry, you got your hand going, or you're waiting for a minute? You should hear from the neighbor.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I actually think that's a very prudent thought at the moment. Let's hear from what the public's got to say at this point, because we can go round and round and round on this at the moment.
Okay. Anybody in the public like to speak? Come on down.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. There are three of us here this evening that would like to speak. Patrick Ridge is here, the owner of the property, and Paul Santos, our surveyor.
Well, he owns Island Kitchen and what used to be the Bamboo.
That's correct.
Yeah,
correct.
and the parking.
So, for the record, I represent Patrick Ridge. He owns Island Kitchen, and he, as you know, recently purchased the building that was known as the Gray Lady Building, and now it's commonly referred to as the Ice Cream and Donut Building. And just to be very clear, my client purchased this building really for one reason, and one reason only, and that was to get more parking. He knew that he had rented parking from the chicken box that you had heard earlier, and his breakfast and lunch business, people just couldn't find parking in that lot, so he ended up renting spaces so that his clients were able to get in and to have parking spaces. The application before you to simply remove this restriction that allows the Atlas restaurant to be open, and it's not just for, it would be probably for breakfast and lunch, because my reading of what they asked for was to remove the restriction that they could only be open for dinner and Sunday brunch. So I didn't hear anything about just breakfast or just lunch. I heard remove the restriction. My client has no problem if they want to serve 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. That's not the issue. The issue for us is parking and only parking. And we have frequently seen customers that were going to Atlas for dinner drive into the parking lot that is not a shared lot. Patrick owns both of those buildings, and he owns all of those parking spaces. Mr. Reed, in my opinion, misrepresented, and we're not going to get into the derelict fee statute here, and we're not going to get into any of those things that should be before the land court, but he misrepresented that his client owns those, what he considers to be 4 spaces. We consider them to be 3 spaces on Chin's Way. We do not agree with that at all. We have been clear that we are not prohibiting any customers from the Atlas to use those spaces on Chin's Way, but we are clear that they do not own them and they do not have any exclusivity to those spaces at all. Part of your application and part of the email that I received from counsel in Boston at 4:35 today, 1 hour before this meeting was to begin, was a reiteration of what Mr. Reed argued about the derelict fee statute, which has absolutely no place before this board. And I find it fascinating that all of a sudden, after all of these years of what the chair mentioned about all of the permits that have gone out with the ZBA and with the planning board, all of a sudden now we're talking about who owns those spaces. And that is not an issue before this board at all. We have no problem with the customers of Atlas sharing the space, those 3 spaces, and we have been very clear with council on that subject. They can share them, they can use them. They certainly haven't been using them exclusively for 20 years. As recently as this weekend, customers of the Island Kitchen were parked in those spaces. They have never been exclusively used. The planning board, Mr. Reed also said that the 2017 decision was withdrawn. I have a copy of the 2017 March decision where they came in to ask for the parking outside. And there was an interesting quote.
The lunch outside. Not parking outside, the
no,
lunch
no, but the lunch outside was the March 2017. And the decision in that stated that it said the existing structure utilizes adjoining parking spaces. It isn't clear in that decision what that really meant by adjoining parking spaces. And I know that over the years, they had been using spaces that Allen Bell granted them at the pharmacy, and those spaces ended with the end of before the beginning of this lease. So they have no spaces there, and I confirmed that with Allen Bell last week. They have no right to park there at all. And basically, we've reviewed the plan that's before you. It plainly doesn't work, and I think anybody that's looked at that knows it doesn't work. Mr. Reed represents that that's what exists there now. That isn't what exists there now. That's not what has existed there in the past. There is no handicap space there, as was mentioned earlier, and it plain doesn't exist. So what I would like this board to do, one of 2 things. I'd like you to deny what's before you now and tell the applicant to come back with a parking plan that works, or with a lease from an abutting property where they can have the additional parking spaces that they need. But this parking plan that's before you now does not work. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Paul, did you want to say something?
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. So I was asked by Rhoda and Patrick just to take a look at the prior permits and the parking space configuration with regard to those prior permits. And Leslie kind of went through the chronology of the permits, but I'd like to just, if I could, briefly go through each of those permits, hit on the parking spaces, and explain what Leslie had spoke about and also some of the things that Linda had mentioned. In 1999, this site was issued a permit for a 28-seat restaurant in which a waiver was obtained to go from 10 required parking spaces to 5 required parking spaces. And the plan at that time depicted essentially 10 spaces within this vicinity. There were 3 spaces here parallel to Pleasant Street. There were 2 spaces here, one being a 16 by 20 handicap space, another being a 9 by 20 space. And that plan depicted basically 5 compliant spaces for that permit in which cars could back in and out without backing in a Pleasant Street. So 3 spaces here, 2 spaces here, one being a 16 by 20 handicap space. That permit acknowledged the fact that there were essentially 5 spaces in this vicinity. 4 spaces which were partially located on the property and partially in Chins Way, and 1 space that could be utilized when the loading zone or loading area was not utilized. So in a sense, that plan showed 10 spaces being used by the property, with 5 being legal. Therefore, the entity granting that permit gave a waiver from 10 to 5.
However, stay right there for a second. That same decision, when they did that 10 to 5, acknowledged, I think you mentioned it, that those 5 truncated spaces might exist on Chins Way.
Correct.
But
That's
not
why they gave a
entirely
waiver for
on
those.
the
They said they
property.
were there, but they gave a waiver for those 5
Right,
spaces.
because they didn't meet the dimensional requirements, and they didn't own the entire space.
In '07, a client came back and asked for 20 additional seats, bringing the requirement now. So now the restaurant has a allowed occupancy for the purposes of the permit of 48 seats. They did not change the requirement for parking. The 10 spaces that we just spoke about still existed. They, however, did reference an agreement that was to be had between the Bell, what was owned by the Bell property here, in which that permit was tied to the fact that there was an agreement for parking on the Bell property. So those 20 seats were added with the agreement that there would be an agreement in place for the Bell property. That was the prior restaurant owner, I think, was it Sophia?
Sfolia.
Yeah, that was that restaurant, and that restaurant was in place. And in fact, that permit specifically makes reference to, it's a condition that the license, leasee, or covenant agreement allowing parking on an adjacent property shall be in effect concurrently with the relief granted by the board. So that's the additional 20 spaces, 20 seats we're talking about. In the event that said agreement between licensees, leasee, or owner lapses or is modified in any substantial way related to the number of spaces, applicant is required to submit a request for further modification.
Which they did not do.
Then in 2017, applicant came back and asked for an additional 12 seats. So that now brings the total restaurant to 60 seats, in which those 12, though, were outdoor seating. That was specifically for outdoor seating. Again, no change in the parking waivers. Initially, what was granted, there was no requirement for any additional parking. It acknowledged that there would be 12 additional outdoor seats, bringing the total seating to 60. Now, at that time, the site zoning had changed to the CMI requirement. You get the benefit of the 1 per 6 seating as opposed to what was originally the 1 per 4. So as it exists today, there's an approval for 60 seats on the property, 48 internally, 12 outside, and the current parking requirements under the CMI would be 14. There'd be 14 requirement under the CMI. 10 for the actual seating, 3 for the employees, and 1 for the dwelling component associated with the structure. And that would bring us to where you basically are today. You have 60 seats approved. Under the current CMI, there's a requirement of 14, and acknowledging that the 07 permit was tied to an agreement for a license or an agreement for parking on the Bell piece. And that's just, I think, concisely brings it to where you are. I think Leslie hit on some of those, but at least the numbers are all there. And with regard to the parking plan as it exists today, again, the original approval, 3 spaces here, 2 here, 1 being a handicapped, and they did acknowledge 4 spaces here with the 1 space stacked. So these 5 that are shown are acknowledged on the original plan, albeit the fact that the board recognized that they were within the layout of Chins Way.
And they didn't meet the dimensional requirements.
And they did meet the 9 by 20 and dimensional requirements. So what we have here is these spaces here are not what was originally approved. These spaces were never shown. And also you have the agreement with regard to the Bell property. And then, having worked on Patrick's property back here, Remember, the only public spaces that exist in this area, you have Pleasant Street and you have Dave Street with regard to what is legally public parking spaces that are outside the confines of any private agreements or licenses. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
I'll keep it really brief. I would love for them to open for breakfast and lunch. I want greater revenue for everybody in Mid-Island. It's just when you present a parking plan that doesn't work, they're going to end up parking in my parking area. And I leveraged my house and pay $16,000 a month to a bank to provide parking for my customers. And I already allow Atlas customers to freely park in my parking lot at night, and I have never had a parking sign that has taken away from that. What's changed is that they now want to come into Mid-Island at the most congested time of the day when the pharmacy and Stop and Shop and my restaurant is really busy, and that's just unacceptable to their parking plan is kind of unacceptable to me. I paved that road 2 years ago, the entire road. They didn't own it then because that was a $50,000 bill. And in the last storm, they didn't call to pay any share of plowing or sanding, which have all been done and paid for by me for 5 years. And so, if they do end up owning it, I hope that they'll reimburse me for their portion of it. But I can't say enough. I really studied everybody's permits, and my business partner and I made a very calculated decision. And we're happy to keep status quo, which was basically letting them informally share parking at night. It's just during the day, it's just too much. We can't even get in delivery trucks. It does affect our business. And the last thing I'll say is that I really mean what I say. I reduced seats in the two restaurants last year because parking was too congested during the day. I literally took away seats. So it's hard for me to watch you guys add them with a completely inadequate parking plan that just doesn't work and is not existing.
You don't have the same problems at nighttime, though.
Right.
At nighttime, the way I always looked at it was what's been there, as Nat would say, has always been there. I didn't care. It's not legal to say I'm not going to give them an agreement to say you can freely park in my property. I couldn't park my truck at Nat Lowell's house tonight.
Right.
But
It's a long walk to get there.
I could walk, but it wasn't as congested. The pharmacy's not going crazy at 9 p.m. The Stop and Shop is not going crazy. I mean, the Stop and Shop salad bar and everything. It's just a really busy time. So that the problem I have is really just this parking during the day at lunch, because it doesn't work. And I told them, go to Lucky's, go to Chicken Box, go. And I've tried to propose things that might work. And what Mr. Reed said isn't completely accurate, because I proposed something, and then I guess he didn't call me back. It's because it wasn't of his interest. He didn't come back and say, hey, how could we make this work? He just said, I'll see you in Langport. And I said, all right, I'll see you there. So.
Can I just?
I would suggest we could beat this to death.
Yeah.
What I would suggest is that it be continued to February to see if Arthur can work out something with the Chicken Box and with Patrick, or some sort of a calming of the waters over there, and see if they can come up with something. But I'm kind of loath to increase the burden over there without some outlet for the parking. This isn't Dan and the Cape Cod 5, which, as you recall, wasn't an easy sell either. We had to sort of broker that and continue it until they agreed, and continue it again until they agreed. The Stop and Shop has a requirement for, I think, 118 spaces, Leslie, which are outside the ones that are in the street. People do park there practically, but on paper they're required to show that they have them. The same thing, we ran into the same problem with the Sea Grill, where they had to show that they had those spaces when we started changing uses in the Sanford building.
Mm-hmm. The parking.
So there's a lot of things going on here.
The parking on Pleasant Street was changed abruptly after by the selectmen about a half a year after the Stop and Shop opened, because Bobby DaCosta said that he didn't think that the parking should be for people traveling to restaurants. So they limited the use of those spaces
What,
from
15
1 hour
minutes, 1 hour?
to, I think, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And specifically said it wasn't for restaurant parking.
Because we had brought that up here at the planning board, that's where the takeout is. That's where everybody grab and go on that end of the Stop and Shop. So people typically park there for less amount of time. We didn't want those spaces held up like they are in the regular parking lot.
So they
And that
probably
works.
account for
People are going in and out of those spaces all day long over there, and I would assume that if we put the same parallel that are in front of the Cape Cod 5, which are used all day, if we put the same type of parallel spaces in front of Atlas, that those would be used all day long for their clients or people running into the grab and go when they're not open for breakfast or lunch. So I'm having, theoretically, I don't mind them opening for breakfast and lunch. In a practical matter, since I've been involved with that whole thing from the beginning, when Chin became Chin's and when they converted to Hen House, I was with the ZBA at that point, and I have a real problem with adding to this problem without somebody getting some relief on the parking, at least on paper. How they work it out among themselves over there is something they're going to have to deal with, but I think it's a problem for us to allow the expansion of the use across time zones when the whole reason, as Paul said, was because they offset each other on the timing between the chicken box, the hen house, and the hen house had to close, I think it's 7 at one point. So there's a lot of things going on now because it's become very popular. It's the year-round populations downtown. You've got outstanding restaurants there, very close together. And you have the other use now with the taking over the Gray Lady building, and that's packed with people. So I think we have to consider this whole shebang and continue it. Does anybody have a problem with continuing it?
No.
Before you do that, I'd just like to see if there's anyone else who wants to comment on this.
Rhoda, I know Arthur's jumping up. Rhoda's jumping up. Arthur?
The only thing I'm jumping up for is to say if you want to continue it to February, I have no objection to that.
Okay. Fine.
And as far as parking is concerned, we don't actually have parking as part of this application, but again, it's a fair subject for discussion.
But it's an increase in use. We didn't address the parking increase terribly well in the last decision, and it's something that is going to come back up because of the intensity of use and the fact that this is based on a 1999 parking decision, which isn't relevant at the moment. Rhoda?
Excuse me. I guess our concern is that we've tried to work something out, and you basically left the meeting and we never heard from you again. And I don't think, and I've talked to the owner of the building at least 3 times and called her and explained the situation. I don't think she's ever been even near that parking lot. I don't think she realizes how many cars are in there and how crowded it is every morning and every noon. And it is. And I don't think that it's fair for this board to ask Patrick to share that parking lot when he has spent so much money building that building, redoing the building, paving it. I mean, it's a far cry from what it used to be. And that's why he did all of this, so he would have parking. I think he's been very kind to let them use the spaces at Chin's Way. They don't own them. If they want to go to land court and fight with us about who owns them, we're happy to do that. But they don't own them. He will continue to let them use it. But to expect him to share breakfast and lunch when he can't even get all of his clients in the parking lot, I just don't think that's going to happen. And if that's the kind of agreement that this board is looking for, I just don't think you're being fair to my client.
And admittedly, I parked at the Stop and Shop and had to walk down Chin's Way. So, I mean, we've all had to do it.
Right, but I don't think that he should be giving them parking spaces that belong to him and his client. And it just doesn't, it's just not fair. And, if I thought we could work something out, we tried. They weren't interested. She wasn't interested. I don't get the feeling that her attorney's going to want to work something out. I mean, he wants to argue about the legalities of it, and that goes to the land court, not here. Right. So, I would like you to ask them to come back either with a revised plan that makes sense, where cars can back in and out, and not to have exclusive use of those spaces in Chin's Way, but to use them if they're available, or to rent space like my client had to do for several years. He had to pay to rent space, and that's what he did. And you heard him tell you that he cut back the number of chairs that he had in there when he knew that he couldn't provide the parking. And he did that to his detriment, but he did it. So, I'm a little bit concerned about continuing it.
We have to consider all that, and parking is back on the table. So we're going to continue this, guys?
I just want to ask one question, because Jeff's out there sitting there, and I just want to ask a question about possibly changing, like blowing up the front, Jeff. Like, just pretend that this is new dirt except the building. Because, I cannot get into the hate parking argument. I just can't stand it, because some of the Mid-Island is already there. You know what I mean? Like the already there aspect versus a new structure.
They have a plan, Nat, of 5 spaces. They always have.
No, Linda, wait a second. We're trying to jiggle this, and it is kind of a, what if they get rid of the front, back to Barry's point, the easement to the town would be part of that concept, but getting rid of the bushes and just making it like just the building is there, and then let's figure out some kind of angled plan, something that makes sense, that doesn't necessarily take care of every single customer that goes there, because I don't think that that's what we're trying to do, but to make it reasonable. That's just my point.
Mike wasn't talking about angled parking on their property.
No,
he was talking about it in the street.
I know. I'm talking about the whole way around the whole property, because there's like a lot of wasted space there.
Mike's plan is partially, as I read it, partially in the street layout and partially in the...
Right. No, I know that.
But it didn't take away their parking or the handicap space or anything else that was in front of the building, which they cannot take away.
Okay.
Barry?
I didn't say that.
Can I ask you, Attorney Reed, have you had an opportunity to meet with planning staff as well during the course of this?
We haven't actually had a meeting.
All right, so...
I'm delighted to meet with planning staff.
You just took the... You see, listen. This board had a concept several years ago, which, again, was Mid-Island. I think here we have an opportunity and a due diligence to have to allow you to look at all alternatives here one more time. Unfortunately, push is coming to shove a little bit. But I don't want to necessarily lock you into this one option. I hear of, just rent the chicken box property, because you don't know if that's going to happen or not. I think working with staff, there may possibly, I won't say there is, but may possibly be reasonable alternatives under which to approach it. Okay?
I'm certainly happy to do that.
And I don't think a month's worth of time is going to make or break things here. But I think this board... Again, there are members of this board who kind of have a concept of what needs to be happening there too, and I think that is something that we would be remiss if it wasn't explored either at this point. Somehow we need to begin to make it all still work. So that's why I'd like to give it a month to try to allow you to work some various things here, and God only knows, maybe Rhoda can have her way too with this, of where you haven't been able to meet with them.
We have met.
They have met.
Okay, all right.
But they need to keep talking, is the point.
All right, but I got the sense that at some point, and allow me if I misquote, that he either walked away or didn't get back to you in the final end, and now something happened.
No, there was just no agreement. And,
there was no agreement. Okay, all right.
I had the argument about what you got the letter
anyways,
about, and that's
anyways,
not what...
I just
what we're going to take into account.
Right, I understand that. I'm not even going there. But what I am saying to you is that I would like to give them one last month to really take a good solid look at what some of the other alternatives may be. And I think part of that includes dealing with the town here again.
Okay, well, we have met with Leslie and Andrew probably
multiple
2 or 3
times.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
So,
yeah.
I mean...
That I don't doubt.
David?
Through you, Madam Chairman, to Leslie. Now, they're in violation already.
That's correct.
Right?
Yes.
So, what happens to that? Doesn't that invalidate the special permit they've been working under?
Not technically, but there is an issue.
Hang on, let's let staff answer that, please.
If the easement has lapsed, which it seems
Which it
that it has, then they would technically be in violation of the permit. And the remedy to that in the permit itself says that they need to file for a modification. So that does need to be dealt with one way or the other, whether they move forward with this or not, it still needs to be addressed.
So they might want to have that conversation quickly because of just the deadlines for February.
Yep.
Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion to continue?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
David, you're on this one. All those in favor of the continuance to February?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, just be a little careful, because if you get sick or something, you just
I
want
know.
to leave it open.
Carl's here.
No, I'm just saying, you want to leave it open right
Okay,
now.
open.
That's
But
all.
David's voting to continue.
You don't need that.
Okay.
That's okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Hope
you
there's
all.
some movement between now and the next month. Tracy Cullinane, this got a little muddled at the last meeting. This is something we've already done. We don't need any more information. It is what it is. It's a secondary lot. It's just clarifying. Somebody had an issue with something that's not before us, and it's just clarifying what we did before. We did this
Yes,
what,
I know
back
what
in
it
last
was.
year.
Yeah. Well, oh, this is a different one. This isn't the,
This is Erica's.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, and we already did this, and it was a little nebulous. Leslie, go ahead and explain it. There's not much happening here. There's no burning issue.
So this is a situation where the two property owners want to convert from a condominium form of ownership to a secondary lot.
It has a covenant already.
On the plan on the screen, Lot 2 is the covenant lot, Lot 1 is the market rate lot. They came in several months ago, received a special permit for the secondary lot, and that special permit was not clear about which lot in the future could have the tertiary dwelling or any other structures for that matter. So they just want to clear it up and get a decision that says Lot 1, the market rate lot, is the lot that's entitled to the tertiary dwelling or anything
Yeah.
else. And the two owners are in agreement.
and-
It just isn't clear in the paperwork.
And George Honiak found out the real story with all this? Because he came in.
We've heard nothing from them since then.
He did
No,
not-
but they understand this. This is not adding anything.
We don't
No,
know
they're-
if he understands or not.
Oh, okay.
At the
doesn't
last
matter.
meeting, he said he would contact me. He did not.
He never came back.
If he did come into the office, I did not speak with
Okay.
him or meet with him.
All right.
But the summary is the application and the relief that's being requested doesn't allow them to do anything that they wouldn't already be allowed
Right,
to do.
that's
They're
right.
just
Right.
clarifying
Tried to
it.
explain that at the last meeting, but it was kind
Okay.
of inappropriate at the time.
This is a public hearing. If the board doesn't
Yeah.
have any questions, anybody in the public wants to speak to this? Seeing none,
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Barry made a motion to close the public hearing. Nat seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Carl?
Wanna- yeah, thank you.
Aye.
Okay. Somebody want to make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the,
Nat made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Carl seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Okay. In favor?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous, Catherine? Okay, Nantucket Community Sailing Employee Housing, 12 West Creek Road, which is Ryder's property, which is that vacant lot right on the corner there of
Yep.
Pleasant and West
Oh,
Creek.
well.
We have combined them. There is an A&R with the frontage on Pleasant for both lots.
No, we haven't combined anything.
No, we combined them on our agenda, so they're not split
Oh,
up.
I see what you mean, right.
Okay,
right, yeah.
so we have an A&R with the frontage of both lots, 5,000 square foot, 70, whatever they are, on Pleasant, not off of West Creek. The access is going to be off of West Creek. Was the neighborhood dormitory?
Yeah, neighborhood employee housing is
That's
the
why they're
category
together
that
here.
we now have under the bylaw, which requires a special permit from the planning board.
Now, do we do the A&R first? Because it's on that one lot,
I
not
would
both
think so.
lots.
I mean, you can do the A&R. The A&R is completely separate from, I mean, it's what we're going to do, but you might as well get the A&R out of the way.
Well, it creates the lot upon
creates the
which
lot.
the dormitory is going, because you're
Right.
going to have the dormitory lot and a
That's
vacant
right.
lot.
That's right.
So somebody want to make a motion on the A&R?
Sure. Motion to endorse the NRs.
Is there a second?
Second.
Nat's made a second. Any further discussion on the A&R? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the dormitory is going on the lot that actually fronts on West Creek, correct?
Yeah, if you have the plan that we submitted with this, the site plan, Can we get that up on the board?
For the A&R?
No.
No, the site
The
plan that
dormitory
went in
site
with
plan.
the special
Which is right
permit
after Cullinan.
application. I think you just went past it.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Right. Just getting myself oriented because it's looking at it in a different perspective than I
Yeah.
had before. In any event,
So the dormitory is going on the lot
it's
closest
going-
to the post office.
It's the lot that's immediately adjacent to the post office.
Okay.
That's right. But because of the fact that I think we need another curb cut on Pleasant Street in that location, like a hole in the head.
Yeah, exactly.
do it anyway.
We're having the access come in from West Creek Road with obviously then the other lot, which will be used for another purpose, probably disposed of by the by Nantucket Community Sailing, which owns the whole thing now. That lot would use the same driveway entrance from West Creek Road for whatever use, commercial or otherwise, would be placed on that lot.
Arthur, go right to the parking, why you're asking for the parking waiver, and what validates a parking waiver here.
Well, we have 11 spaces technically required for 11 bedrooms. This is going to be an employer dormitory, employee housing project for the employees of Nantucket Community Sailing.
Only.
Only. Who are young people, largely college students, some doing various things at that age, where they're summer sailing instructors. And they will be strongly discouraged from bringing cars and having cars parked at the site. There will be, and we get into the point of the management, and I think you have the plan that's been submitted for the management of the dormitory. There will be an on-site housing manager managing this housing and the other sites that are rented by Nantucket Community Sailing, who will be living at the property and will be in charge, and obviously he or she will have a car. But the individual dormitory residents will be strongly discouraged from having cars. Bicycle racks will be provided, NERTA pass. They'll be able to be driven in NCS vehicles to the places where they will be doing their instruction. And therefore, we thought that it was quite appropriate to have a waiver of parking. I think we don't need a large number of parking spaces in order to accommodate the needs, granted the type of housing that it's going to be. It's not an employer dormitory where you're going to have a lot of adults that are in the habit of having cars at their beck and call at all times. It'll be the younger student type of employees. Diana Brown, the president of Nantucket Community Sailing, CEO, is here to discuss all of this and any other questions that you have.
HCC has already done this, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. John?
No, I don't have a problem with that.
No.
They address the bicycles, NERTA passes. I think it's, and I know most of the employees are young. I don't have a problem with it.
Arthur, you're using the management plan that we drafted for the yacht club, right, as a base?
As a base, Diana has the whole stuff on
I
that.
can give you copies of it if you'd like.
We have to have them.
I made copies for everybody.
Thanks.
What we have is a dormitory I'm giving you 3 documents. A dormitory management plan, which outlines what we're going to do with the dorm manager, the bicycles. Employees will have to get permission from the program director in order to bring their car, and they will be assigned one of the parking spaces. Typically, our employees all bring bicycles. They don't even have cars. So we don't anticipate that being a problem.
Yep.
Catherine, do you know who this is, right? It's Diana.
I'm sorry, Diana Brown.
Brown.
Community Sailing.
The other piece, the second document in here is our employee housing agreement, which lists all of our rules and procedures for living in the dormitory. As Arthur said, we're going to have a full-time dormitory manager living on-site in the apartment, who will be the dorm mother, if you will, as well as the caretaker and the person who shuts down the wild parties. I gave you the
Yeah, that won't go over well.
I actually talked to the police chief about having a police officer be the dorm manager, because I thought that might be a good fit.
Probably a conflict of interest of some sort.
But we do, it'll be an adult person, not one of our instructors, but that person will be employed by Nantucket Community Salem.
Diana, what happens to the building when all these guys leave in October?
We basically shut it down, except for the apartment where the dorm manager lives. We anticipate he might be a year-round employee. And so we shut down the rest of the building and just leave it.
Because the only thing that concerned me about that was that we don't have any buildings like that in Mid-Island, which has become our downtown. We have no unused structures anywhere in the Mid-Island. It's sort of an anomaly. So we just didn't know if you had abilities to rent it to contractors, people that come over like for the hospital or people that are on short-term stuff. So you might want to have that conversation.
Yeah, we're not asking for that at this point in time. And I think that if we were going to, we would come back and ask you, probably with regard to a specific use.
Right.
I think we can assure you that in no circumstances would be renting it to a contractor's crew or something like that. It would be much more likely that we might at some time in the future be interested in being able to provide some housing in connection with a nonprofit or governmental use rather than something like that. But as of now, until we have any specific idea as to what we might do, the plan would be to use it exclusively for NCS.
Okay.
I also gave you in your package a sample offer letter of someone who would be having employee housing. We typically hire 45 in Salem instructors, and we provide housing for 16 or 17 of them. And so this would be an example of the offer letter we would include.
Cool. John? Nothing?
No, I guess I like the idea that you had, or at least brought up the discussion about what you do in the off season. Although I would like to caution right now, if they chose to do something like that, then I think we'd have to think about the parking for that time, because right now, the way the parking is lined up, I agree, it fits the use right now, but later on, if you're going to be renting it out, that might not fit to the parking. So
I'm getting there when I'm getting there.
Okay. But I like how it's designed right now, and I'm okay with it.
Nat?
It's fine. I'm not arguing about parking. I'm not going to tell them to go to the chicken box.
Please don't.
So, I still think.
They can, if they're old enough. Of course,
I meant the car.
They're going to be walking.
Chicken box parking lot, not the chicken box facility.
They can walk to the chicken box if they. Get in.
This application, because it was written, I wasn't even looking at this, thinking about the previous application. This proves what I'm saying. Mid-Island is going to change. 5 minutes after you think something is, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes Barry and I kind of like cross each other. He doesn't know that I said the same thing or tried, and then he tried to say something, and it sounded like what I said, and it didn't. But it's really the same. Like the Kitty Murtaugh's would be in a different place. If it was built a couple of years later, it would be at the street.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we fought before
Tooth and nail.
Linda was on the planning board, so maybe she'll let me keep talking for 2 more seconds, about loading zones and shared parking on West Creek Road. It was a fight in here.
I
over
know.
nothing.
Yeah. I was
and
representing
now
an
it's
abutter.
a new idea.
I represented an abutter who wanted the thing put close to the street.
There was a ton of parking spaces that we put
Yeah.
chains up and little signs, not this is my space. And it's like, that just doesn't work, especially with this friendly, lovey, fluffy community we're supposed to be, and then we fight over parking. It's unbelievable. And I'm just saying, this is a great plan. I don't care what happens in the winter. I'm sure you'll do the right thing because you're already doing the right thing. I'm not worried about contractors' trucks being parked there because I think that it'll happen by itself, the right thing. So I'm fine.
Just to be clear, Mid-Island overlay and moving things up to the front of the lot
is all part of it now.
was because the ZBA messed that up and refused to listen.
Right.
And the ZBA did that to Kitty Murtaugh's. That is the case,
Last place.
the landmark case, that changed all of this and took all their control away from Mid-Island because they kept messing that stuff up because of Kitty Murtaugh's, because I was on it, and I fought to have Kitty's pulled forward, and I was
Right.
I was the administrator, and we couldn't get them to listen. So now we have a little bit more of intelligent response to Mid-Island commercial. So,
I think the point is to have a consistent response, and I think that consistently, the point as is now being handled is that in this instance, buildings sort of be close to the street.
and the Atlas building would have been up front, and all
Right.
that would have been done in the back. So things have evolved, but we still have the drugstore in the back, Foley, Atlas in the back, Kitty Murtaugh's in the back. Some of the other buildings were pre-existing, like the dentist's office, but we're working through it now. But we still have past mistakes right smack in our face. Barry, any issues with it?
No, I like what you're doing. It looks great. It's a great idea. It's a perfect fit for the area. And I like the idea that you'll think about what the future has in store. Sometimes it's better to walk instead of running. And so I think this makes perfect sense about where you're heading right now.
Carl,
It's great.
David?
Fine with it.
Okay, I just have a couple of things. We're going to be consistent. We don't know where the trash is going, and that's 18 people. Is it on there? I saw utilities on here.
There you go. It's right there.
Garbage, yes.
Oh, garbage. I was looking for the word
And then
trash.
that's a little shed where they can put their bicycles.
I was looking for the word trash, and the bike racks are not on the plan.
Yes, they are. They're right in front
Where?
of the
Right
shed.
there,
on the
bike
side
rack,
there.
yeah.
And the place to store
I got it. I couldn't see it on here.
That's fine.
The on-site manager, Leslie, whatever you can incorporate from here, like the NRTA passes, all that stuff that we normally put in dormitories, unless you want us to just incorporate that,
You're welcome to incorporate that document.
Leslie.
Thank you. She'll figure it out.
Yes, we'll incorporate the dormitory management plan as presented. And we can include a condition about maintaining bike racks.
Good.
Obviously, whatever's on the site plan has to be maintained and repaired and replaced. We'll include a condition about NERDA passes and a condition that the occupants have to be employees of community sailing. It's
Well, that's-
exclusive to that.
That's what I was
No.
going to, my next one was something that the ZBA has a habit of doing, and Arthur knows that, making it particular to an applicant because they're not bringing cars, because it's a
Yeah.
soft use. It needs, I would rather have it particular to Nantucket Sailing, and should the ownership of the building or the tenancy
Come
of the
back for
building
modification.
change, it was required to come back to the planning board, because that would change the intensity and
Yes.
whoever needs parking. Because what I don't want to see happen is for everybody to park over at the restaurant, Pie Pizza, and park in all of their spaces because they don't have cars. So somehow we have to address that in the decision. Because they could legally, they could take up all the Pie Pizzas,
But
because they
I-
don't own all those spaces either, they're half in the layout. They could park over there and tie up Pie Pizza's whole dinner crowd.
I think we've covered that by the materials that we've submitted, though. And
Well, you
with all
said
that
strongly discouraged, and that's not working for me.
But strongly discouraging it by what Diana indicated about what they're going to have to sign when they sign up
Okay.
to stay there.
But strongly discouraged means nothing to me.
They will only be able to park there if they're assigned a parking space. And every year, we only have 3 or 4 cars anyway.
But that doesn't stop somebody from bringing a car, not parking it on the site, and taking up all of Pie Pizzas or Lucky's parking. That's what I don't
they're
want to
gonna
see
know
happen. So I'd rather there not be allowed to bring a car.
So-
That's what Mariah Mitchell had to do.
So we could say that they're explicitly not allowed to bring a car unless they're given permission. Because
Yeah.
then we'd only get.
Then you'll know where they're parking if they bring one. Okay.
Yeah.
And they could park at the town parking lot, they could park anywhere.
They could park at our maintenance facility.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, I was just out there today.
Yeah.
They got a lot of parking out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just, I'd
Gotta get
rather,
bus.
the permission thing is a big deal to me, because then that, the sort of, you got control of who has one and where it is. Fine. Any other questions from up here?
Good plan.
This is a public hearing. Any comments from the public? Not seeing any.
I'll make a motion to close.
Second.
Okay, Nat's made a motion to close the public hearing, and Barry made a motion, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carl? David, you're on this. Point, David. And somebody want to make a motion with those conditions?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? Nat seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed.
Leslie, thanks for your help.
Love this one.
Okay, that one. Hunters, you're up. Jeff, did you
Jeff-
see the staff report?
I have not.
Want to give him one? Is this a special permit, everybody?
Yep. Jeff Blackwell for
You.
the owners and applicants, Brad and Craig Hunter, are here in the audience, as I think everybody knows. This is a rear lot subdivision, which is quite a new mechanism for subdividing a property. It was just adopted in the spring 2017 town meeting. And what's up on the screen now is a so-called proof plan, which shows a conventional subdivision with an interior road providing, full compliance with the subdivision control law and the planning board rules and regulations. The intent of the rear lot subdivision special permit zoning is to eliminate interior roads, which is stated right in the language of the zoning, and to allow a mechanism for creation of density that's no greater than that's allowed in a fully complying subdivision arrangement. So the next plan in the in your on your screen is a plan that subdivides the property into two lots. The existing curb cuts would be maintained for the lots, the two structures as they exist, and no greater density is created in terms of the number of lots. This is an area that where town sewer has been extended up into Green Meadows, and that work is well along, if not close to complete.
Well, this is perfect. What we wanted.
Okay. There are some things we have to talk about. Nat?
No, I didn't know this is a clean one. This really explains why we should have done this years ago. Keep all that land on the tax rolls, make it look the same without having more roads, more signs, more pavement, more everything that doesn't really fit these little neighborhoods. So it's good. I don't have any questions at all. Well, I mean, I know you
Okay.
have stuff all the time,
No,
so I'm
there's
not
just
going to
something-
try to say something
There's
that
a
I don't
piece
even
of
know
this
what
that's
you're
missing.
thinking. What is missing?
Barry?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Is there something missing?
Leslie and I talked earlier today.
Okay.
Because of the density of this neighborhood, this is one of the more densely developed lots. If you look at the aerial, which I don't think you have up there.
No, it's right here.
But
Oh.
if you look at the aerial, it is much more densely developed already. The back building, I assume, is going onto its own lot completely, Jeff?
That's correct.
And that one that's on the front. And this allows them to have another dwelling over there.
Yeah, but they got, how much
They
ground
could.
cover are they going to have in the back? Doesn't look like they have much at all.
Yeah, the back one isn't the issue. It's the front lot. And the front lot, Leslie and I were talking about limiting the other, if there's another dwelling over there, limiting it to the same
yeah.
size as a tertiary dwelling, to avoid having a monstrous ground cover over there, because they're allowed, I think, Leslie, 40, 30%, whatever this is, Jeff? 40%.
40%.
And that would be completely contrary to the entire rest of that street. Though a couple of them have secondary dwellings at, I think, 3, 5, and 7. Not John's, which is next door, as far as I know at the moment. The other issue, Jeff, and I don't know if you looked back at the aerials. I always do that when there's more than one curb cut. They had a circular drive on 1998, which means that their 2 curb cuts are grandfathered. When you go to 2003, the same configuration exists where they have an in and out, like a round driveway in front of that, the front dwelling.
Yep.
When you go to 2007, it always takes a half hour to come up here, the driveway is the same. You go to 2011, the driveway changed. It now, instead of being in and out, 2 completely separate driveways without any approval from
The
the
second
board.
curb cut. Mhm.
Yeah, without any approval from the board. So the driveways themselves, and in 2014, they're completely separate. And as far as I can tell, Jeff, the driveways are going where?
The driveways as they exist would be maintained. This plan is consistent
Which
with.
is right here
Yeah,
and right here.
that's right.
What is that?
That's a sewer easement.
Okay. The problem I'm having is that the double curb cut changed radically from the double curb cut that was historically there. They are no longer connected, so it doesn't go this way. One's over here, one's over here. So I don't know exactly, Leslie, on a technical basis, if that is a problem. Because we had to deal with that on the one down the street from me.
As long as they've maintained 2
Which
and
they
they're
have.
substantially in the same location at the street intersection, then they're fine.
Okay. 'Cause
How they change inside the site doesn't really matter.
Okay, so they're okay then. And where, do we have an easement, Jeff, going down that right side to get to the back? Is there an easement right there?
Yes, a portion of that existing driveway will exist over the front lot, and that's that shaded area,
Okay.
which is an easement area for passage.
Okay. But my advice would be that if there's a secondary, it would be in the front lot, and it would be, meet the tertiary guidelines. I don't know how anybody else feels about that. And no duplexes on the lot. That's
I don't-
Leslie and I talked about that.
Okay, I have a couple questions.
That was her suggestion.
I have a couple questions then, based on what Linda's saying. Jeff, now that I'm looking at the real plan, they're a little bit oversized. Leslie, what was the zoning? Was it an was this RC2?
It's R1.
It was RC2 and now it's R5.
No, I know what it is
Basically.
now. Just because it's R5 tells me that it used to be RC2. That's what I
Yeah.
thought. Okay, so we've already reduced the density down here somewhat as far as ground cover
40%.
and the sewer's going in. The lots are oversized to some degree, especially the front one. The tertiary is only 650 square feet of living space,
Yeah,
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And under the bylaw, but we've let it go.
No, but if we restrict it to, it hasn't been built yet. This is where we get into this discussion about the tertiary. You have
New
been to
versus
meetings in a
existing.
while. Yes, that's where we get into a huge issue with a place recently, and I don't want that to happen again because I think we should just restrict the size of the dwelling, regardless of whether it's it's going to be the second dwelling. There's no room for 3. The back lot, what's the ground cover there now, Jeff? With what's,
1309.
because they've got an oversized lot.
1,309 square feet.
Is that 40, in
They'd
regards
be
to how
allowed-
much is
Is that
left?
30%?
They'd be allowed
30%?
2,400 and change.
Yeah, no.
I thought
no.
R5 was 30%.
40.
It's 40.
So what we
Okay.
do is restrict the back lot to 1 dwelling and allow
No,
the front
absolutely.
lot to
That-
have 2 dwellings.
That was what I was going to say. We restrict the back lot, and the front lot, theoretically, I don't see an issue with, I don't want to say whatever fits, but I don't think they should be restricted to a tertiary size.
Yeah.
That's the larger lot. You guys are here.
We spoke just before the hearing started. We have no problem with that.
I mean, I just
With
don't
what?
see it doesn't make sense to,
With what? Is it limiting it to a tertiary size?
no, limiting nothing in the back and whatever fits in the front.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going through all this trouble.
If you want
It's
to
not
impose the 650 square feet, we're fine with that.
That's what I'm saying. And then if they want to do something like that, they just come back. And we'll have a chance to look at the whole, I'm sure this isn't the last one coming in here.
No, but they're all
Everybody
different.
else's house is dead center of
They're all different, Linda. Like, for example, like this street is very, very easy going. It's really already built. It's not like we're adding problems. I mean, if they wanted to put a circular driveway into some horseshoe driveway in someday, they still could do that. You know, theoretically. I mean, that land's not going to be where the house is going to go, I'm assuming. It's going to be to the left of the house. So, I mean, a lot of times we get into backing out, all these other issues. This doesn't have that problem, like the Hooper Farms, like the fairgrounds. I see it slightly different. I see this as it's perfect setup. This is old Nantucket in this the way this is
They're
being
allowed
done.
about another 2,400 square feet on the ground in that front.
No, but
that would be totally alien to the whole neighborhood.
But what I'm saying, Linda, if we limited the dwelling to say 850 square feet, that's better than saying just the tertiary.
Fine, I don't care.
That's what I'm trying to say. I don't think we should limit it to 650 and get into that, hashing that out again.
850 on the ground, just ground cover, not second story, not basement. Barry?
Yeah.
Go back to where we started. Do you mind for 2 seconds? Which was, you said you could file a conventional subdivision plan, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, but that's
Just
You
time out.
look at it.
Time
There's two lots
out.
you're
Time
thinking
out.
about that land.
We're not going anywhere with that.
Do I get to finish what I'm going to say, or are you guys going to keep interrupting me with any other thoughts? Thank you. So if you were to file a conventional subdivision plan, that essentially goes to primary, secondary, tertiary, with a roadway in there. I'm just saying, okay, somehow they'd have to make it work, but that is a reality here. Okay? That is what is before this board, but they've decided to come before us and do something a little more creative and a little bit more in harmony with what the neighborhood should look like at this point. So I'm fine if they want to limit the front part, let the one building stay in back, which is what I'm hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on the front, let them do something which is essentially a secondary dwelling. And I honestly think there's some modesty that will be involved there. I really do. Because the alternative to this kind of really catches my attention. So I think I hear a set of neighbors trying to do the right thing here as well, too.
Actually, if we really want to go back to the original horrible subdivision, they'd only be allowed 2,000 square feet,
Yeah,
period.
there's nothing there.
That's less than what they have right now.
Yeah.
Which is what the
So-
worry is, because they'd be allowed a lot more, because they took the road out and put it back into the lots.
Yeah.
And I'm all right with 850, because that's not too, and they've got to have the 20% differential, so.
Well, I think we're making more of it amongst our own board. We already have a willing
Right.
applicant.
You're willing.
We have the surveyor that says we can do this, and we've already restricted it to 850. I say,
Fine.
we're good.
What's wrong with it?
And no duplex. That was Leslie's.
Yeah, I agree.
Madam Chair, through you, just one other, I think, very minor condition, and Jeff touched on it, is that all the dwellings connect to sewer when it's available and to town water.
I think that's automatic.
Absolutely.
Yep.
They've made a mess of your
They
road
got
long
the easement
enough.
already.
Horrible over there. All right, so what I'm hearing is that there'd be limited to an 850 secondary dwelling on the front lot, limited to one dwelling on the rear lot, no duplexes on either lot, and connect to sewer and water when it's available. Is that where I'm hearing?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, this is a public hearing. Anybody have anything else to say?
Motion to close the public
Okay,
hearing.
Barry's made a motion to close the public hearing. John seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and Carl's on this one. So the conditions are as we just stated. Somebody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Barry made the motion, John seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's like early enough to like get to bed at a reasonable hour. Oh, we've gone to midnight.
The doors haven't
Yeah.
started slamming shut yet.
No, we haven't
So
heard
it's
the
very
doors
early.
lock yet.
And the air conditioning isn't on either.
Yep, you're right.
Okay, Kelly Williams, Andrew Forsythe, 127 Main Street. This is simply because we now have control over both the 20% differential and the 10-foot setback between primary and secondary. They want to put a sunroom on one of the buildings, and they want to reduce it to 5 feet on the rear of 127, which is an 1850 house. The one in the back is an 1800 house. And they want to put the addition on the back away from Main Street to reduce it from 10 to 5 feet between the front of that other house and the sunroom. Anybody have any questions up here? Barry?
Yeah, so why isn't this before the ZBA as staff?
They don't have jurisdiction anymore.
Is that true, Leslie?
And she was incorrect on this.
Hold on, I'd like to hear from staff.
So the comment in Holly's staff report,
Right.
starting with although staff believes this application,
I'm just curious.
I think that was included inadvertently when the application first came in. There was some confusion about
She
the
didn't
nature
know.
of the application, and once we got that straightened out,
Now it's in proper form for us.
it's in proper form. So that was old information.
Ah.
But there's really two sections that are being requested. So the first one is to reduce the scalar separation between the primary dwelling and the secondary dwelling from 10 feet to, I think it's a little over 5 feet. And then the other is to allow the alteration to the pre-existing non-conforming structure. So that's what would usually be before the ZBA, but because of the other piece, they're both in front of the planning board.
We're the special permit granting
So we
authority now.
recommend approval of both.
Any questions from up here? Any questions from the audience?
Motion to close the public.
David, you're on this. Kathy?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Barry's made a motion to close the public hearing. John has seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So you want to make a motion? David's on it. David, you want to make a motion?
I'd make a motion to grant the
Relief? Okay, David's made the motion to grant the relief. Is there a second?
Second.
Nat seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. This is ridiculous. It has to be here. And he's over there having a conversation with Sarah, except that it's a formula business,
Oh,
pre-exists,
that's why we're doing it.
and it's
Wondering
moving,
what was
the
going on.
men's clothing store on Main Street is moving out over to John Race on Easy Street, the new building.
Yep.
And Black Dog is moving off where it's getting flooded every 5 seconds, and it floated away the other day, up to Main Street at 32 Main. And because it's a formula business, that's why they're here. Do you need to say anything else? No.
That about sums it up, Linda.
It's pre-existing non-conforming.
Already wrote the decision.
Carl, you're on this. Any questions from the board?
I'm sweating. That was
Any
rough.
questions from the board? No. Anybody from out there? No. Somebody want to make a motion to close the public hearing? John's made a motion to close the public hearing. Nat seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Motion to
Approve. Is there a
Second.
Carl seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Good job.
Thank you very much. Oh, man.
Kill him. We've been sitting here for 2 hours. Doug, come on up. Mike, come on up. I'm going to recuse from this.
On 4 Dovetail.
Yeah. I've got too much connection to this, and my son works for him.
Yes, Mike Conley, land
came
surveyor
up with
for
the idea,
Doug
so move on.
LeBrec, who's here. A little bit of history was we were going to go for the rear lot subdivision, created a proof plan. If you go halfway, if we could see that. If you go halfway on the back line and bring it up to the curve, everything for the proof plan was okay except for the regularity factor.
Right.
It was
Yep.
it's just too long and too thin. And so we went to the ZBA. It was the first one that they had heard about the rear lot subdivision, about asking for a waiver for the regularity factor, and they did not want to do that. So that's why we're here today with an easement road. We cannot do a road by itself because of its R40. The lot is 80,020, so we could only cut it right in half the long way for the proof plan.
Got it.
So we went with the, as the plan is shown on in your packet.
But but what you're doing kind of makes it like a real lot subdivision, even though it's not.
That's correct.
Which is
we
good.
could not get the
So
it was only the 20-foot extra of area.
Yeah, and the good thing about, we knew that this was going to happen occasionally, because when we approved that, when town meeting approved the Article 73, I think it was 73, it's a 40-foot layout. You can't do a 20. Some of our little roads that we like, technically laying it out to 20 feet, you can't do that with a real lot subdivision. So as a proof plan, so this is sort of the kind of the rural road alternative, Barry, back before I was on, whatever they came up with then, some kind of other fluffy word. But this is the right way to do it without doing it. So we knew this stuff was going to happen. So
Anything else?
that's good.
Good.
You're chairman. I'm sorry.
No, don't
Yeah.
worry. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Anything else from board members? Leslie, anything you got from staff perspective?
Barry, so the primary waiver that the board would be granting here is to allow the roadway to be within an easement rather than a separate lot, which staff supports.
Yeah.
The applicant does need to make a significant revision to this plan, which can be done at another meeting if you want to vote on it tonight. The easement needs to show a cul-de-sac type design or something to provide adequate frontage for Lot 2 in the rear. Because the 20 feet...
How does it work with the turning?
Well,
Let her finish.
the 20-foot minimum would have worked if it was an actual rear lot subdivision, which this isn't. So it needs to be either 75 feet or the 30-foot reduction on a cul-de-sac. And that's something the board can vote to sign at a subsequent meeting.
So do they have to come back before us, or is it that we can let staff become the final say in that matter?
Well, just like with any approval required subdivision, you would vote subject to certain conditions. So that would be one of the conditions, that the final plan shows an easement area that provides adequate frontage for the rear lot. We would also suggest that you include a condition that the lots are connected, or the structures on the lots are connected to water and sewer when available, and that any driveway aprons meet the bylaw requirements. And it's not clear, I don't think, on anything that you're going to see on the screen tonight, but on the aerial photo, it looks like the proposed driveway is extremely close to an existing sort of sprawling driveway. Yeah, that's not really showing it on the existing lot, the front lot. So there may need to be some separation, like a hedge or a fence or something, to delineate the road or driveway to provide access to the rear lot from the one in the front.
Okay. So that's something you can work with the
Yeah, we
applicant
can
on?
just put that in the decision.
Okay, good.
Is
Any-
that whole issue with the sewer all cleaned up out there? It's
They
gotta
have
be,
sewer,
isn't it?
yeah.
That's what I
They have
thought,
plenty.
because of the private sewer issue from the
Yeah,
previous.
well, right out front.
Okay.
Anyone in the audience wishing to comment on this? Jeff?
Jeff Blackwell. I don't have a client here. I just was looking through the agenda this afternoon.
Yep.
And saw this. And the first thing I want to say is I'm not opposed to a subdivision on this property, but I think that the mechanism that's being used is inappropriate and potentially paints the planning board into a real corner and creates a precedent that you probably don't want to create. I think a more appropriate avenue to create a subdivision of this property is the by 139.8C, which is a secondary residential lot, where no waivers are required. It's a special permit process. In fact, you could create a smaller rear lot than what is currently proposed. But for the planning board to waive everything puts you into a precedent-setting situation that is, I've just never seen an application of this nature. And I would really ask you to consider it carefully, because as the lawyers in the audience probably would concur, and if anybody comes to me and says, gee, I want to subdivide my property and receive every single waiver, I'm going to be saying, well, I just saw it happen, and, you know, the genie's out of the bottle. You're letting the genie out of the bottle. That's my point. Otherwise, it's subdividable, but the mechanism, I think, is an important distinction for the planning board to consider before you just grant every single waiver that's asked for. I've never seen this before.
Sure.
That's all.
Leslie, do you have a comment?
Thank you. Jeff actually made some really good points, and I'd just like to clarify that the reason why we're suggesting that you approve this, because it is totally out of the ordinary to proceed with a subdivision plan like this, it's because the lot meets the minimum area for 2 lots. It meets the minimum frontage for 2 lots. But because of what appears to be an extremely regular shape, actually isn't. When you apply the regularity formula, it just doesn't work. So we're not for, you know, those particular aspects. We would not be recommending that the board proceed with approving a subdivision plan with the road in an easement.
So you'll essentially list that as either a finding in this case or something in the document to memorialize the fact that it really is the regularity factor triggering all this underneath it. Okay. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this? Board members, are you clear on where we're going with this and what the parameters are underneath it now? All right. This is an AR subdivision, so really it's just the 3 of us who are going to be sitting on this one at the moment. In that case, gentlemen, I'd suggest that if there's no further testimony or anything else you want to debate, close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right. Motion's not made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously, and the pleasure of the board.
A motion to approve with Leslie's comments and criteria that would be put into the approval.
Okay.
For the turning, for the circle and the easements, whatever we're calling it, and the fact that the irregularity factor is the reason for this being the route to take.
Yep.
Water and sewer, aprons that meet the bylaws, driveway separation, the 2 lots.
Yep. You're both in agreement with that. So,
Yes, I'll second.
was there anything else, Leslie?
Just one more thing, that the easement has to be dedicated to roadway purposes, so something will have to be recorded to that effect.
Got it.
Yep.
So, is that your motion now, Matt?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion's now made and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Great. Thank you. Linda?
The sketch plan? Did anybody ever come for the sketch plan? We were going to take it up like 3 hours ago, but you weren't here.
Oh.
You know, we just didn't want you to have to sit through all this, but you didn't anyway. You came in when you wanted to.
Sarah, it's nice to have you.
All the other warrant articles in front of you have been continued to January 11th at 5 o'clock at
So
2
we're on.
Fairgrounds. Leslie, do we need to formally vote to move them over? We do, the warrant articles.
Yes.
Somebody make a motion to
So
put all
moved.
these warrant articles over to 5 o'clock Thursday, January 11th at 2
Second.
Fairgrounds.
So, made and seconded.
That's Barry, and who seconded? Matt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we're at your sketch plan. God,
Hello.
hello. We've been here before.
So, yeah, I think Bob Emack's letter pretty much spells this out, but our proposal is to extend the existing road and create this cul-de-sac on a rural road basis.
Where is this? Where are we?
Is this Graves?
We're off, no. It's
What end of viewpoint are we
Spencer
on?
Verney, and
No,
it's
go
at
up
the
to
end of
Go up to the
Capon.
GIS.
We're right near the pond.
Oh, in the Verney, okay.
Yeah, it's
I
Verney's.
know where we are.
It's Verney's,
It's a vacant piece on Verney's, right?
correct,
Yeah.
Yikes.
What do you want to do?
correct. So go down to the sketch.
Tristram's Avenue isn't there anymore.
Okay, so if I had a little pointer, see the road? Yeah, we're creating that cul-de-sac off
an
that
existing-
road, off that existing road.
Okay. Which comes in from Cliff?
Comes in from Capon,
Capom?
yes.
Okay. Does anybody have a problem with that?
I'm just
We're gonna have
trying
to-
to get a visual on where we are.
We're going to have to do, some
The
grading.
west of Verney's house.
We're going to have to do some grading and fill of the road coming in because it's quite bumpy. And then we thought we'd do like a gravel spec for the cul-de-sac.
And you're not actually going to have 10,000 square feet of cut road there at the cul-de-sac, right?
We'd rather not. We'd like to do a 12-foot, yeah.
Does
That's,
everybody understand that? They're not going to cut that
Yep.
whole thing. They're going to cut 12 feet to get to the line.
we're
Though
going
it's
to
on
create
paper, it's
it
there.
large so it's there, but we're not going to actually build it all out.
Got it.
Because you've got 2 lots at least off of that.
Just two,
Yeah, right here and right here.
correct.
Anybody have any
It's-
questions about
It's currently
this?
one lot.
You guys? Nothing?
No.
You guys can't sit on this. But this is somebody want to, do we make a motion on this?
Is this just a,
It's
You
a,
would want to,
it's a sketch plan, so I'd like some
Conceptually accept it.
feedback and,
I don't have any problem with it. Does anybody have a problem with it?
how about just
that's a
Leslie?
gigantic piece of
Leslie?
property,
I don't have.
what it is.
We don't have any issues with it, but when the applicant, if the applicant comes forward with an AR plan, and I think Sarah did mention this,
Yeah.
that, instead of focusing on the cul-de-sac that's going to be created, I think the board should really have a discussion with the applicant about making improvements to the way
Yeah.
leading from the end of Capon Pond Road to the site.
okay.
That definitely has
Yeah.
to happen.
It
From
means
the end of the,
beginning.
where it ends, the pavement ends.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
the
part.
dirt starts.
Yeah,
Right,
'cause that's where it
that,
gets bad.
that's sort of like the Friendship Lane area over there, that mess there. It just all runs down and it's
Right.
ugly. But
Right.
I don't think that, okay, I didn't realize they own this property. I've been going up there for years, I didn't know it. Yikes. Yeah, I mean, we, obviously, Sarah, we're not finished, say, oh yeah, we're all set.
No,
It's
no,
just
no.
conceptually, it's fine.
Okay.
Do you
That's all
need
I'm saying.
Do they get a letter from us that I have to sign?
Not for a
No.
sketch plan.
Okay.
No.
I have a question for Sarah.
Yeah.
Yes.
How wide is the way from the end of Capon? I mean, it looks like maybe 10 or 12 feet.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Okay.
We'd have to widen it, I think, to 12 feet.
This is like Pippin's Way, is that right?
It is not like Pippin's Way. It's the opposite of Pippin's Way.
Okay.
What's the
Okay.
zoning up here?
LUG
Is it
2,
LUG
I
1 or
think.
2?
I think it's 2.
Two, I think, LUG
Yeah.
2.
It's a weird
Okay.
place to have 2, but I think it's 2.
Okay, well, that's fine.
You're asking me all the hard questions. I know it's on this plan, but
I'm looking, and
I'm
I
too blind to be able
half
to read it.
asleep, so-
LUG 2.
Okay. Okay,
Anybody have any issues with, we get a fairly favorable response, Barry?
No, just a quick question. Does that give you the appropriate guidance that you need? you think,
Yes,
to-
focus
okay.
on the road, make
All
it
right.
wider, fix it, and don't worry too much about the cul-de-sac.
okay, exactly, yep,
Okay, yes.
good.
Okay.
So do we,
We're done.
we don't have to do anything, right?
No.
Voting, okay.
She's, as long as the applicant walks away feeling like they've gotten the appropriate information and the board has disseminated that, then that's all you do with a sketch plan.
I mean, I'm assuming that you're not going to be looking for sidewalks
No.
and
Oh, God, no.
traffic signals and all the other
Streetlights.
street lights.
Okay.
And that a rural road alternative of some sort is appropriate.
Yep, you betcha.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have no public comments. Mr. Bond? Just hanging out? This is an early night for you. Next planning board meeting will be actually Thursday at 5 o'clock at 2 Fairgrounds, and the next regular meeting is February 12th, Monday at 6 o'clock in here, unless it looks like it's too big an agenda, and then we'll burr up with that. 2018 annual town meeting will be Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018 at 6 p.m. in the Mary P. Walker Auditorium at the Nantucket High School for all those tuned in. It will not be Monday, it will be Tuesday, starting that week. I think there's something Monday. What was Monday? There was a reason why it wasn't Monday. It was something.
It was a religious holiday,
There you go.
I think.
Oh, Passover.
That could
Maybe.
be.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Somebody make a motion to adjourn at 8. Wow.
I want to hang out.
8:53? Or
Can I
what?
make one announcement?
What?
One announcement. Andrew's not here.
We know that. We can see that.
So, I think you all got an email today about your interest in attending the APA conference in New Orleans.
Yes.
And Andrew has a session with some other people from the state that was approved, that he
So
will be
he's gonna be-
presenting at the national conference. So I think
He's
he
going to be
deserves
forced to go. He didn't
kudos
wanna
for
go.
that.
He didn't want to go to New Orleans. He's going to be forced to go to New Orleans.
And isn't
So if you see him, tell him congrats.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
wasn't there also a presentation that's coming up at MMA as well too?
Oh, yes,
On-
MMA.
When's that?
And that's soon. I don't know the exact date.
Next week, I think.
Yeah, sometime this month.
What it is, yeah.
Are we going to that? Oh, that's Mass Municipal, isn't it?
Right,
Yeah.
Mass Municipal.
Now, what are the dates? Do you have the dates for the thing in New Orleans?
That was included in the email, the 21st, I think, of April.
Yep.
Because I'd be
It's
interested in
at
going.
the end of school vacation week.
I'd be interested in going. He's not in school anymore. And I'll drop him in Memphis at my mother's and drive down. Because he won't fly.
We may need to do a cookie sale or something for that.
Kid into the real world.
Motion to adjourn.
He's
then?
never going to happen.
Well, that's crazy.
All those in favor of adjournment?